people suffered from?
I think it is a discussion that must continue because there is a growing consensus among peoples of the world that the wrongs, the heinous wrongs of history need to be made right. And I think reparation is a discussion along that line.
But to be clear, are you talking about clear financial compensation? Because the UK Foreign Secretary at the recent Commonwealth Summit in Samoa said that it is not, quote, about the transfer of cash. I just wonder whether you as a government minister in Jamaica think very clearly it is about the transfer of cash.
Well, I don't personally, and this is not a government position, personally, I don't think it is necessarily about transfer of cash. I think it is a lot more about a recognition that a wrong has been done and a determination to right that wrong. Now, the mechanisms for righting that wrong is still for discussion.
Edmund Bartlett, we have to end there, but I thank you for joining me on Hard Talk.
Thank you, Stephen.
That was Hard Talk. I'm Saroja Coelho. You're listening to CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team at Information Radio. You're on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on that app and on YouTube. Thanks for joining us. It is Tuesday, November the 12th. It's 3 degrees in Winnipeg this morning, and everyone back to school after a long weekend for Remembrance Day. A high of 7, by the way, in Winnipeg. Today we're going to have lots of sunshine, but it's going to be windy, so winds are going to be 50, gusting to about 70 today. So that's windy. It'll calm down just a touch this afternoon. So thanks for joining us. We're on air with you till 8:37. If you have an issue on your commute, you're going to call Corey Funk at 788-3093. Corey also directs the show. Hey, Corey. Good morning to Abby Adeyemi, who's behind the controls. Abby is our technical producer on the program and covers the forecast on the air. And a final good morning in our control room, at least, to Kevin Nipatebo, who's here as well. Hey, Kev. Kev waving at you on the YouTube stream. He's our morning show producer on the stream. And if you haven't yet subscribed, please do so you can watch us and listen to us. It's magic. Let's go to the newsroom right now and get headlines with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg businessman with a long history of legal battles is back in court again. A woman alleging Richard Boone swindled her out of the ownership of 2 properties. We'll hear more on that. As well, labor disruptions at the ports in Vancouver and Montreal could have a ripple effect on you. University of Manitoba transportation expert Barry Prentice says goods shipped by container from international destinations are going to be impacted the most, including most of what we buy at big retailers. You can hear more on the port strikes coming up on World Report, and we'll have more Manitoba news for you coming up at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Heather's with us, of course, throughout the whole morning. In the first hour of the show, we also are going to be hearing about Canada and the fact that we may have our very first case of human case, that is, of avian flu in this country, a teenager in BC. So what's happened and what could it mean for Canada's poultry industry? We'll have that discussion in the first hour. In addition, just because it's on sale doesn't mean you're getting a great deal. Our friends at the CBC's Cost of Living pull back the curtain on deep discounts. So if you're a deal lover, you want to hear, probably want to hear this one. And then later on in the program, I want to mention coming up at 10 to 8 this morning, we're going to hear from a local pharmacist that is making it easier for people who live with autism or sensory issues to get their flu shots this fall. And we'll find out how. Stay tuned.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
The British film director Sir Steve McQueen made a name for himself making massive films about difficult things like the Irish hunger strike or his film 12 Years a Slave. He'll be here to tell you why for his latest project he wanted to focus on London during the Blitz.
Why can't you tell me? Where's my boy?
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. The RCMP is now collecting data on public complaints of bias and discrimination. It's a change a civilian watchdog group has been urging the Mounties to make. It says the scope of the issue was hidden for years, and bias and discrimination complaints were logged under other categories. Carissa Donkin with our Atlantic Investigative Unit have the latest.
Akwasi Owusu-Bempah studies the intersection of race and crime at the University of Toronto.
Making it a homophobic or a sexist or a racist slur is different than a simple problem with an officer's attitude.
Until April, public complaints about discriminatory RCMP conduct were internally tracked as improper attitude. A few examples from New Brunswick. In 2021, someone complained an officer said, quote, all natives were wiped out of Newfoundland. That complaint was supported. In 2017, a sexual assault complainant said a member laughed when she gave her age and the age of the assailant. That complaint was informally resolved. And then in 2022, a person alleged an officer lacked impartiality during their arrest because of their skin color. That complaint investigation is ongoing. CBC News obtained 8 years' worth of complaints about New Brunswick RCMP employees up to 2022. An analysis found at least 52 allegations categorized as improper attitude, but would fit into the new bias category. That's 8% of improper attitude allegations. Alan Polchis is the chief of Sedunsis, or St. Mary's First Nation in New Brunswick. He says there's value in examining the complaints.
You know, if the officer's been called for 5 calls and they're doing the same thing and it's not working, then they have that data.
The RCMP doesn't plan to recategorize old complaints, but in a statement, the RCMP say the bias category will help drive meaningful change in the organization. Carissa Donkin, CBC News, Fredericton.
United Nations Secretary General says world leaders must pay up to prevent climate-led humanitarian disasters. Antonio Guterres opened the COP29 climate conference. He has a warning about global warming.
With the hottest day on record and the hottest months on record, this is almost certain to be the hottest year on record. And the masterclass in climate destruction.
Climate financing is a talking point at this year's summit. Guterres says rich polluting nations must help poorer countries pay to transition their economies away from fossil fuels. The negotiations involve huge amounts of money, anywhere from $100 billion to $1.3 trillion each year. A big win today for the energy giant Shell. A court in the Netherlands has overturned a ruling that told Shell to cut its carbon emissions. In 2021, a lower court ordered the company to reduce its carbon emissions by 45% by the end of this decade. Today, an appeals court says Shell does not have to comply. Crystal Gomansing has the details.
Presiding Judge Carla Joustra dismisses a lower court ruling which sided with an environmental group. Donald Poles, the head of Friends of the Earth, which brought the original case forward, looked down in dismay after the judge's initial words. The organization wanted Shell to comply with targets defined by the Paris Accord. The appeals court said Shell does have a social standard of care to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to protect people from global warming, but ruled it could not determine a defined amount. Back in 2021, the lower court ruling was met with cheers and hailed by environmentalists as a landmark ruling. Following today's decision, Poles was emotional and vowed to keep fighting, but next steps were unclear.
It's too early to announce new steps. We're going to take the time to read the court judgment.
The appeals judge noted that Shell is on track to meet its greenhouse gas emission reduction targets and aims to be net zero by 2050. The energy giant is welcoming today's decision. Crystal Gomansing, CBC News, London.
A criminal case against Donald Trump will be decided today. A New York judge is expected to rule on whether to overturn Trump's criminal conviction in his hush money case. The U.S. president-elect was convicted on 34 counts of falsifying business documents to cover up a potential sex scandal. But in July, the Supreme Court ruled a president's official acts cannot be prosecuted. And Trump's lawyers say the jury saw evidence involving Trump's official acts as president. They say that is grounds to overturn his conviction. International aid organizations say Israel has missed a critical deadline. The Biden administration gave Israel 30 days to increase the amount of aid getting into Gaza. The deadline is today. Louise Wateridge is with UNRWA, the UN aid agency for Palestinian refugees.
Over the month of October, the average amount of trucks entering the Gaza Strip every day was 37. So that's 37 trucks for a population of 2.2 million people who need absolutely everything.
Last month, the Biden administration said if Israel failed to get more aid into Gaza, it would pull back its military support. North Korea and Russia are officially working together on defense.
2024년 6월 19일 평양에서 체결된
A newsreader with North Korea state media announcing their mutual defense treaty was ratified yesterday. The deal was forged back in June. It calls for each country to come to the aid of the other when attacked. The formal announcement comes as North Korean soldiers have been deployed to Russia. Many parts of Canada are currently experiencing drought conditions. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada says some areas are in extreme drought. Normally, that would cause problems for farmers, especially during harvest. But as Faith Greco reports, some growers in eastern Ontario say there's a silver lining to the dry weather.
We had the big wet of summer, and now we have the big dry of fall.
Climatologist David Phillips says the shift has been challenging, but it came at a manageable time.
That was frustrating for farmers. They couldn't hay, or it's just too wet. And then all of a sudden, now you come to the fall, it's almost as nature's turned off the faucet.
Much of southern Ontario and Quebec is in moderate drought from a lack of rain, though not as severe as other parts of the country. Brian Stratton is the manager of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. He says water levels in the Rideau River are holding steady despite the drought. Stratton is also a part-time farmer. He says the drought came at a good time.
The fields were able to dry out in September, October, and the harvest is for the most part complete.
Rob Parks is also a farmer in Ottawa. He grows soybeans, corn, and sorghum. He says the drier weather made harvesting easier this year.
There was no mud this year at all. We're pretty much all done and everything washed up.
Parks says that in past years, tractors would be covered in mud and icicles. This year, he was able to harvest and wash everything down in 20-degree weather. Despite the weather extremes, Parks says his farm had an excellent year. Faith Greco, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Canadian Union of Postal Workers says its members could walk off the job as early as Friday if the union and Canada Post cannot reach a deal. It has issued a 72-hour strike notice to the company. The union says the two sides are still far apart on a number of issues, including wages. Canada Post has yet to publicly respond. The Trudeau government is resisting calls to intervene in lockouts at Canada's two biggest ports. Contract talks with dock workers in Montreal and Vancouver have stalled. On a typical day, the ports move goods worth tens of millions of dollars. As Yvette Brand reports, the work stoppage is concerning for business.
We really need this to get resolved. It's an urgent issue for us.
Kurt Nickaday is Vice President and Chief Economist for the BC Council of Forest Industries that moves $11 billion worth of softwood and other products through Vancouver's port each year.
I think the government just needs to use all tools at its disposal to get this done.
The terminal is in its second week of a lockout. Mediated talks broke off Saturday. Canada's Labour Minister is urging both sides to settle, but pressure is mounting as billions are lost. In Montreal, 1,200 port workers were locked out Sunday by the Maritime Employers Association. Montreal Port CEO Julie Gascon.
One day at the Port of Montreal, it's $400 million of merchandise.
Montreal workers are holding out for salaries matching the $293,000 average offered to their Vancouver counterparts, who also want jobs protected from automation. Dennis Darby, Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters President, says port work stoppages are coming at a bad time.
Timing couldn't be worse, and we really need to find a better way to resolve these disputes.
He says right now, with a new U.S. president about to take office, it's crucial Canada is seen as a reliable and cost-effective trading partner. Yvette Brand, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. This is Information Radio. I'm Marcy Marcusa with our team at the show. You're on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, on YouTube, School Day 6. It's a lot of info to start a Tuesday morning. We'll give you more in a moment, actually. We're going to plug you into what's happening in the weather today. We are expecting a sunny day ahead. This hour on the show, remembering his biggest fan and hero. We're going to hear from a Winnipeg High School footballer who dedicated this season to his late father, so stay tuned for that. Plus, Canada may have its first human case of avian flu. A teenager in British Columbia. We're going to talk about how that happened and also what it could mean for Canada's poultry industry. And a little bit later in the hour at about 10 to 7, from trade to defense, a Trump presidency is likely to pose multiple challenges for the Canadian government. All this week we've been chewing through them. And today we'll talk to Ryan Tumulty, political reporter with the Toronto Star. So stay tuned for that. Heather Wells is first to plug us into what's happening here at home. She has your Manitoba News headlines. Hi there.
Hi there. Well, the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority says it is investigating after a man says his wrong leg was amputated. It happened on October 31st. 48-year-old Jason Kennedy lives with a bone infection and diabetes. He says he knew he may eventually lose both his legs, but when he went to Grace Hospital for the amputation surgery, he says he was understood the right leg would be removed. When he came out of the procedure, he discovered it was the left leg. We're going to hear more about that. As well, the city of Winnipeg is struggling to offer French language services to bilingual Winnipeggers. A city report says a lack of resources has delayed improvements to government services in French at all levels. We'll hear more coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, thanks, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells, of course, will be with us throughout the morning. And now let's say good morning to the rest of the crew. Hello, Corey Funk.
Hello.
Hello, Abby Adiyemi.
Hello.
Abby and Corey, of course, so weather, traffic, and we don't actually arm wrestle for who goes first. It's usually Abby.
It's going to be a sunny day in most of the regions. We'll see some clouds rolling, though the north will be seeing more like snow and cooler temperatures, while the south, rain is expected later in the day. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at 2 degrees, mainly sunny conditions. We will see it will be breezy this morning, but the winds will ease by the afternoon, and we'll be seeing our temperatures climb to about 7 degrees. And then for tonight, some cloudy conditions and showers overnight. But right now, we are at 2, heading to a high of 7.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
And now, Corey, what's up in the commute?
No point arm wrestling with Abby because he knows he'd lose anyways to me because I'm really strong. Anyways, we got traffic. We got to keep this moving here. So just heads up, there is a week-long closure starting today of Portage Avenue East. If you're wondering what that is, that's that section of Portage Avenue that takes you towards the Fork. So that's like, right at the Bank of Montreal.
The east part?
Fairmont, exactly. The east part. People don't really realize that it's got its own name, the Portage Avenue East. It's that tiny little section between Maine and the baseball park.
I know. I'm feeling punchy, sorry. Yeah.
Clearly. We should arm wrestle. So that's the one. Part that's going to be closed for the next week or so. If you're wondering, what does that mean for the Santa Claus Parade? Well, the Santa Claus Parade, which is on the 16th, is going to be it will open for that. So that's all still fine. That's still part of the route, but it is going to be closed for the next week. So you're going to want to find another way to get if you're maybe take Portage to get to the Fork or something like that. You won't be able to do that for the next week. If you see anything else though going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number 204-788-3093.
Well, we're going to start with a really personal story from the football field. While his dad wasn't able to come to every one of his high school football games, Dale Turcotte Jr. thought of him every time he entered the field. Dale plays for the Techvoc Hornets. Now, last week, November 7th, his team became the AAA Curry Bowl champions. They beat John Taylor Piper's 24-11. Dale Jr. dedicated the season to his father, Dale Turcotte Sr., and he spoke with CBC's Faith Fundell about it.
This is your second year on the team. At the end of your rookie season, you made a promise with your dad. What was it?
That I'd make the finals and play at Princess Auto Stadium.
And when you made that promise, he also asked something of you. What did he ask you to do?
He asked me to win the championship.
He died before the beginning of the season, earlier in the summer. How hard was that for you?
It was... I want to say devastating, but it really was more than that. I wasn't super close as a kid with my dad. Up until I was 5 years old, he was in Stony Mountain, and I would visit him, but obviously as a young kid, you don't really remember each moment. So that really wasn't, too much in my memory. And then when he got out, we weren't the closest. He had his battles he'd be battling with, and that kind of put a block in between our relationship. But other than I always knew who he was. I knew I knew who he was, and I knew that I had another father in my life. But we would have our visits every once in a while. He'd pop by, and we'd make sure we spent our good time. Until 2021, where he decided he was going to sober up and make his life better. He was going to settle down. He was going to start a family with my stepmom, and he ended up having another son, my little brother. And that's when I really got to know him. We spent a lot of time on reserve because he lived on a reserve. Shout out Rolling River First Nation. He was there from 2021 up until he passed away in June, the end of June this year. And
and football was a very big part of how the two of you built this relationship. That was one of the things that was the same for the two of you, your love of football.
Yeah. I didn't really know too much about football until grade 8. I want to say that's when I kind of had the idea, because my dad always knew Tech-Block is a football school. He always told me, he's like, hey, I was also a bigger kid. I've always grown up a bigger kid. So he's like, hey, you should join football. And I'm going to Tech-Block, my grade 9 year, they didn't have a team because they've been out of a team since 2019, I believe. It was right before COVID started. And he was pretty bummed because he always knew Tech-Block is a powerhouse school in Winnipeg. He played a little bit. He was mostly a rugby player though, but just the contact sport, they're both different sports, but they have a lot of people put them in the same conversation. So our love kind of brought that together when it came to sports. And we found out I actually started playing in my grade 10 year. He was beyond excited. And to find out I played offensive line, he was kind of iffy because he was a defensive player when he played. But he at the end of the day, he was still very psyched that I played.
You put 2 photos up on your locker.
Yeah. Going into the season, I really didn't know what to expect. Right after his passing, I found I lost a lot of motivation to do the things that I normally would do. I wasn't hitting the gym as much. I wasn't really working on film, working on studying playbook. I was kind of out of it for a month and a half, and up until training camp. I didn't know what to expect if I really wanted to play anymore. I just didn't find the aggressiveness in myself anymore. But when I got there, I told myself, he would want me to do it. He'd want me to play. So I hung 2 pictures up in my locker spot. It was the picture of his obituary and a picture of me and him when I was very young. I must have been 5. It was at this Stony Mountain had done these parties I think it was once a summer. Inmates would have their families with them, and it was just a really big thing. And it was a picture from there. I really love it. It's my favorite picture of me and him.
And it's more than just the photo too, because at the end of each game, you also started doing something. Why did you want to honor your dad? Talk more about what you did at the end of each game, whether you lost or you won.
At the end of each game, I always, after handshake lines, I always sprint to the goal line, the end zone goal line, and I take a knee, look up in the sky, and I just sit there and I thank my father, I thank the supporters, and I thank pretty much everyone that's in my life.
What do you think he would say if he could talk to you right now?
Damn. Well, the first thing he would say, I probably wouldn't be allowed to say on the radio show. But lots of congratulations, lots of I'm very proud of yous. Just straight excitement. Because he would have been at that game, and me and my stepmom were talking about it. He probably would have been running up the stairs, or I guess hobbling up the stairs of the stands, going across, just yelling and just having a great time.
Sounds like you're very proud of him too.
Oh man, it's crazy to say, but I kind of watched my father become a new person, because he was, like I mentioned, he had his personal battles growing up. He battled addictions, so I kind of knew that side of him before I knew anything else. And that when I was 13 in 2021, when he decided to change his life, that's when I met a new person. I watched him grow as finally actually being, a father. Because even though my dad had his personal battles and his addictions he fought, he was really one of a kind. Like, he was the coolest person you could ever meet. I always say he lived a movie star lifestyle. Like, his childhood was, like, horrid. Like, battling these things as a teenager, foster care, being in the correctional systems, and then eventually growing up to be a really great father, person. He online, he was always an advocate for other people who are addicted.
And it sounds like you are using that same frame of mind to continue your work. What's next for you?
My goals right now is to keep being this leader. I'm a two-year captain on this team, and I just love the idea of being a leader, someone you could go to for questions, go to for answers. I just love helping people. My personal story and come up is also in like the very negatives as a child. And one thing my dad always said was, you don't have to become your circumstance. And that has always stuck with me. He's like, you're the perfect example of it.
What a great sentiment. You don't always have to become your circumstance. Dale Turcotte Jr., quoting his late father, he plays for the Tech-Vac Hornets. They won the AAA Curry Bowl championship, and that means they're the high school champions in this province. He dedicated the season to his father, Dale Turcotte Sr., who died earlier this summer. And also quite something for this team at Tech-Vac to come back and win the championships. They had a 3-year hiatus from the league before they started that team up again from scratch.
Rival Canadian brewers brawl on a beach in Australia. Ouch! A James Bond exhibit isn't allowed to mention the spy.
James Bond.
And what's the one word singer Robert Goulet will not utter?
I think I should call my manager.
Only in advertising. Stories from the front lines on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
6:22 a.m. You're on CBC. It is clear and 2 degrees in Winnipeg. Winds are not calm. Winds are south, gusting up to 62 kilometers per hour. That's at the airport. They're going to gust through the day here. We'll have lots of sunshine, though, as we head for a high of 7. Brandon, you're partly cloudy right now. You're 0. Thompson's cloudy and 1 degree as we get into our Tuesday. Well, British Columbia is investigating what may be Canada's first human case of avian flu. A teenager in Fraser Valley tested positive over the weekend. There had only been one human case ever reported in Canada before this. A Canadian resident died of avian influenza more than a decade ago after returning from a trip to China. Now, though rare in humans, H5N1 typically causes mild to serious illness. Since October, a number of poultry farms in BC have reported cases of the virus, and some wild animals have also been infected. Cheyenne Sharif is here for a closer look, professor in the Department of Pathobiology at the University of Guelph. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So what do we understand about this case in BC and how this teenager may have contacted avian flu?
So we're still in very early stages of development of that case in BC. I'm assuming that the case must have been severe enough to have led the patient to be hospitalized. I believe the patient is still in the hospital and being looked after for some of the clinical signs and symptoms. It's unlikely that the patient has contracted the virus from another human being. It's extremely unlikely that we would ever contract the virus from another human being. So it's probably from an animal source that this patient has contracted this virus.
Extremely unlikely to have contracted the virus from another human being. Has that ever happened before, or can it travel human to human? At the moment, there is no scientific evidence that it can. There are some cases that have raised suspicions for human-to-human transmission, but up to now, there's been no scientific evidence to support that. You can also ask the question, could mammals transmit the virus to other mammals? And there is some evidence that they could, but in case of humans, there's been no human-to-human transmission as far as we know. And what does it look like when bird flu spreads from animals to humans? How does that happen?
So most of the cases that we know of have had some exposure to infected animals. So, for example, since the beginning of 2024, there have been dozens of cases in the U.S., thankfully not any in Canada up until quite recently. And invariably, all of those cases in the U.S. have had some history of exposure to dairy or poultry. So most of them are poultry workers or farm workers that work on dairy farms. So exposure to an infected animal is it would raise the risk of transmission.
In terms of outbreaks in the fall, I understand H5N1 rather outbreaks are especially bad in this season. Why is that?
They're bad in this season because this is the season of migration of birds. So waterfowl and other kinds of migratory birds are reservoirs for H5N1 and also for other avian influenza viruses. So H5N1 is just one of the very many viruses that reside in birds, specifically in migratory birds. And in the fall, when they migrate, they can spread the virus. And also in the springtime, when they come back from warmer places, they can also spread the virus in springtime. So we have two seasons for spread of this virus here in Canada, the fall and also in the springtime.
So help our morning audience understand this, because there'll be people pouring milk into their cereal and cracking eggs for breakfast right now that might be worried. What should they know about the safety?
My 2 cents of advice, do not worry at all, because it's highly unlikely that this virus would ever find its way to human food supply chains. As a matter of fact, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, which is the ultimate authority for dealing with this virus, has done a marvelous job of protecting the Canadian food supply chains. And then on top of that, biologically speaking, this virus is highly susceptible to temperatures that we use for cooking poultry meat or for cooking poultry eggs. So I think it's highly unlikely that we would ever see this virus coming into our food supply chain.
Is part of that because if an infected poultry farm is identified, what happens if in that case?
So when a poultry farm is identified and is tested positive and it's confirmed actually in Winnipeg at the Canadian Food Inspection Agency laboratory in Winnipeg, when confirmation is issued, then the flock is depopulated, meaning that the flock would have to be destroyed. And as a result of that, there would be no chance for the virus to jump from one farm to another farm, and also from poultry to humans. So that's why I indicated just a few seconds ago that it's unlikely for this virus to ever find its way to Canadian food supply chains.
And what about for poultry industry, the industry overall? Is there anything that they should do to prevent avian flu from spreading to more animals and potentially people? What are your thoughts on how safe the industry is and individual operations are in terms of the standards they're held to in Canada?
So the poultry industry in Canada is actually well-informed, well-educated, well-prepared for any kind of emerging diseases. Since 2004, when we had the massive outbreak of avian influenza in BC, the Canadian poultry industry has put in place a lot of measures, biosecurity measures. And what I mean by that is these are measures that would ensure that the virus wouldn't get inside the farm and also wouldn't get outside the farm, so they can mitigate the risk of transmission to other farms and also from poultry to humans. So I think they know exactly what they need to do, and they've done over the last 20 years or so, they've done a lot of emergency exercises to simulate what would happen in the case of an emerging disease like this one. So as I said, they're quite well prepared.
Thanks for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
That's Cheyenne Sharif, a professor in the Department of Pathobiology at the University of Guelph, talking to us about avian influenza. It is Tuesday morning. It is November the 12th. Thanks for joining us. I'm Marcy Marcusa. You're on CBC at School Day 6, by the way. Business news coming up, and as you've been hearing in the news over the last 24 hours, we now know that Canada's two major ports, Montreal and Vancouver, are shut down. But for years, we've had labor troubles at the country's ports. So how does this rank when you look at this? We're going to talk about that with in business news with Phil DeMont coming up. Also this morning in the business report, Phil's going to talk about the value of cryptocurrencies, which hit a record level on Monday. So we'll get some analysis of what's driving the surge. If you need us in the morning commute to tell us about anything going on out there, please give us a call. Corey specifically will be picking up the line. 788-3093 is where you can reach us on the commuter line. Right now, your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is 2 degrees and it's windy. Gusts already from the south to 62 kilometers an hour. That wind is going to blow strong all day. We're warming up, though, a high today of 7. The Winnipeg Regional Health Authority is investigating after a man says his wrong leg was amputated during recent surgery. Jason Kennedy is a former commercial fisherman originally from Bloodvein First Nation. The 48-year-old has a bone infection and diabetes affecting both his legs. Kennedy says when he went to Grace Hospital for amputation surgery on October 31st, he understood his right leg would be removed. But after surgery, he saw his other leg had been removed below the knee.
I knew right away it was my left leg that was gone, and I thought, this can't be happening. This is a bad dream. And all I could do was just think, why is this happening to me? And I knew I was under the impression it was going to be my right leg because that's where the worst pain is, right now.
A WRHA spokesperson tells CBC the incident is being reviewed. Kennedy says his surgeon and 2 other workers have apologized. He says he's offering forgiveness but is speaking out to prevent this from happening to anyone else. A man was rushed to hospital with very serious injuries after a serious assault in a trailer park, according to police. Officers were called to Auger Avenue around 7 Sunday evening. That's on the west side of Winnipeg. Police say the victim remains in hospital. One suspect is in custody. The city of Winnipeg is struggling to offer French language services to bilingual Winnipeggers. A city report says a lack of resources has delayed improvements to government services in French at all levels, as well as Francophone communities having little access to services in both official languages. St. Boniface councillor Matt Allard isn't surprised.
There's a gap between Winnipeg's legal obligations to provide French language service delivery, in particular in the Riel district, so that's St. Boniface, St. Vital, and St. Norbert.
The 2018-2022 reports on French language services will be discussed at Executive Policy Committee tomorrow. A Winnipeg businessman with a long history of legal battles is back in court. A woman alleges he swindled her out of the ownership of 2 properties. CBC's Santiago Arias breaks down this lawsuit.
Richard Boone has been sued many times over the decades by financially desperate property owners. Now a businesswoman claims Boone offered his financial assistance so she wouldn't lose an empty lot and a building on tax sales. But in court documents, the woman says Boone's company bought her debt and registered against her properties. Then he told her not to pay outstanding debts or taxes. Boone's company bought her properties when they went up for a tax sale. The woman is now seeking damages. She wants the building's title transferred back to her. Boone declined to comment on the lawsuit, and none of the allegations have been tested in court. Santiago Arias, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The Canadian Union of Postal Workers has just given a 72-hour strike notice to Canada Post. That means the union will be in a legal strike position as of Friday if a deal isn't reached. The union says it hasn't decided yet whether job action will take place immediately, and this dispute comes just ahead of the busy Christmas mailing season. Labor disruptions at the ports in Vancouver and Montreal could have a ripple effect on consumers. University of Manitoba transportation expert Barry Prentice says goods shipped by container from international destinations will be impacted the most. And Prentice says that includes much of what we buy at the big retailers.
Also, our exporters will feel it. We do export a lot of meat products, for example, pork and beef, and to international markets, they're going in containers. And you can't just tell the pigs to stop eating. The pork keeps coming.
Prentice says a lot of that pork is destined for Japan and China. He says it could be a week or 2 before the effects are noticed. He says the federal government will feel pressure to intervene if this labor dispute drags on. And they're off. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers jetting off to Vancouver yesterday for Sunday's Grey Cup game against Toronto. Fans of the blue and gold are also gearing up. Superfans determined to be in the stands. Tina Antonation is also known as Bomber Woman. She says she got her game tickets as soon as they went on sale.
Buying those tickets at the beginning of the year, we always it started off as a joke, but we always say, you know what, we're gonna book our ticket. Our team will meet us there.
Now, Antonation isn't quite set just yet. She says she still has to sort out her flights. This is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers' 5th straight appearance in the Grey Cup Championship. You can hear more on this story coming up in the next hour on Information Radio, and you can find more Manitoba news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
I was just sharing this story over the weekend with some friends, Heather, about covering the Grey Cup for Winnipeg, and you follow the fans and cover it. Abby, Corey, have I told you the story of the locker room before?
I don't think so.
Is it the haircut one?
No.
Or the hair braiding one?
Oh, that's a good story too.
That's
That was producer Janice Moeller braiding Westwood's hair.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah, they were like, we'll give you an interview live for CBC because we were in the lobby where the Bombers were staying for the game. That was years ago in Toronto, and he said as long as you Troy Westwood said you got to braid my hair though because I'm late for practice. So Janice Moeller, our producer, was braiding his hair while I was interviewing him.
That was cool.
She's incredible.
I'm not going to cover Grey Cup this year. Gavin Axelrod, I believe, is going to be on the road for CBC. I'm really excited to hear the coverage and what he brings us. But I was always really nervous when I would go because I would, of course, go to cover, what you listeners are following along, right? The community aspects in the story, but you'd be in the middle, Heather, of all these sports reporters. So I would lean on them. People like Sean Reynolds who know the, Bombers sports scene inside and out. And I had to because the year that I went, the Bombers lost. So I found myself in the locker room, you guys. And now imagine all the Bombers have lost and they're sad and they're upset and they're naked. But I don't regularly cover sports. So I'm like, I was relying on the jerseys for who to approach for interviews.
Oh my goodness.
But everyone's naked. So I'm walking around going, putting mics in people's faces and interviewing them like, I'm so sorry of the loss. What'd you think? And then I totally leaned on Sean. I'm like, Sean, whose voice is this? I don't know. They were sitting there. And yeah, so good luck to Gavin. They're going to win. That won't happen this year. Don't worry.
That's a very funny story.
It's a very different feeling in the locker room after a win, I'll tell you. My favorite part, though, was the other thing that was wonderful was they were upset, the Bombers, and some other media outside of Winnipeg came in for interviews, and Winnipeg media basically protected the Bombers. You know what? These are players, but they're also, in our community, they're community members, they're Manitobans, they're Winnipeggers, and there were all these people sort of protecting them from other media coming in to kind of give them a hard time, which I thought was sort of a nice connection thing.
Holding up towels, being like, have some respect.
I was so nervous. All right, let's get into what's going on. We are fully clothed this morning on Infrared. If you don't believe us, have a look on our YouTube stream. And Abby's here to talk about our regional forecast.
Definitely. Most of the regions, we're looking at mainly sunny conditions in most areas with cloudy covers moving in. Some cloud cover will be moving in later. You should expect some breezy conditions from the south, this morning as you start your day. Winnipeg currently 2 degrees. It is clear outside. We will see some sunny conditions with that wind already picking up this morning, gusting all the way from 50 to 70, and then it will be easing as we get to the afternoon. A highs for today for Winnipeg, we warm up to 7 degrees. Heading west to Brandon, 0 right now. Partly cloudy conditions we're seeing, but that would change to some sunny skies as you start your day. Then it turns breezy in the afternoon. For folks in Brandon, you will be warming up to 9 degrees. Thompson, 1 and a kind of cloudy at this time. You should see periods of snow this morning. Then that would turn to rain, and you should see some clearing in the afternoon. The high would only get to 5 degrees for folks in Thompson. Now, further north in Churchill, it is currently minus 12. It is cloudy. You also see snow starting this morning. Expect about 5 to 10 centimeters once that system passes, and then some breeze. Some windy conditions will be coming this morning, shifting later. You'd only get to about minus 1, though with the wind chill factored in this morning, it actually feels like minus 22 for folks in Churchill. Dauphin is at 3 degrees and clear. Sunny conditions in the forecast. Some clouds will roll in this afternoon. You warm up to a high of 7. Similar conditions in Gimli and Steinbach and Morris. We're seeing temperatures between 2 degrees and 1 for Steinbach and Morris. And those regions will be warming up to 7 degrees later today. The one thing I noticed in the southern region, Mercy, is the rain will definitely be making its appearance overnight, and it look like that's the transition to the white stuff that we'll be seeing close to the end of the week.
All right.
I don't want to say what the white stuff is, but
we all know.
The S word.
We're okay. We'll be mid-November by then. I think, most people saying, we've had such a great fall.
We've had such a great fall.
Yeah.
But right now, it's a cool 2 degrees in Winnipeg.
And snowmobilers are all about it. They're waiting.
They're ready.
They're revved up. All right, let's get to what's going on in the commute. Corey.
Portage Avenue East, that's that section of Portage Avenue, that special section of Portage Avenue between Main Street and the baseball park. That's actually closed for the next week entirely for that construction going on at Portage and Main. It will open temporarily for the Santa Claus Parade to go through on November 16th. But other than that, you won't be able to drive either way down Portage Avenue East. So just heads up there. But if you see anything else going on, that's the biggest issue. Highways actually seem okay this morning, at least according to Manitoba 511. If they're not where you are, if there's something else going on here in the city, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call. I'll let folks know what you're seeing. 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby, as well. And let's go to Phil Lamont, who's here with our business report. Good morning, Phil.
Yeah, one advantage of covering business I hadn't really thought of, dudes are always wearing pants.
Well played, friend. Well played. Let's talk about Canada's 2 major ports here, Montreal and Vancouver, are shut down now. In recent years, though, we have had, all kinds of labor issues at the ports. Where are we in finding a longer-term solution for these disputes as they continue to come up?
Yeah, you're right. The ports, Vancouver and Prince Rupert on the West Coast, Montreal shut down. That means about $1.2 billion in daily trade getting piled up in the docks. But these union management fights at the ports have been going on for years. Last year, there were 2 labor-related disputes at BC ports. And also in 2023, union members operating the locks on the St. Lawrence Seaway, they staged a 2-week strike. 2020, Montreal, the port there was shut down by a strike. So this April, federal government set up a 2-person commission to look at fixing labor relations, specifically in the West Coast ports. These are people with long experience in mediation and stuff. But there were earlier government reports looking at port disputes, and they pointed to lingering problems with labor relations in these areas. First one is the way companies negotiate. Generally, they work under an umbrella group rather than as separate companies. You don't talk to Company A. In Vancouver's case, you talk to the Maritime Employers Association. But that means unions can't bargain directly with individual companies. So, for example, in BC, the Longshoremen's Union had an issue with technology installed by one of the companies, but they're not bargaining with the company. They have to kind of go talk to the Employers Association. Makes it cumbersome. Companies also have a tendency to want Ottawa to intervene. You've got to come in and solve this. We saw that with the rail lockdown earlier this year. Makes sense if you want to get the ports operating again in the short term. But what it means is that neither unions nor management have any incentive to bargain. That's because the feds are probably likely to impose some settlement anyway, so I'm not moving off my position. So you, in effect, have 2 positions rather than people negotiating. The commission, Ottawa's commission, set to report in the spring of 2025. You get the sense that they're trying to look at solving the problem. The issue in the end of the day, though, it's collective bargaining, and that's always a bit of a wild card because the 2 sides operate differently.
Let's go to another story here. The value of cryptocurrencies hit record levels on Monday. Is that because Donald Trump likes Bitcoin?
Yeah, that's part of it, but not just because he's flogging the cryptocurrency. Bitcoin closing in on $90,000 each. That's a record level, up 45% from a month ago. Big factor, aside from the fact, Trump likes it, and that, gives you that kind of panache. But Bitcoin and the others have long operated in a gray area. They're not covered by existing securities regulation, but they probably know something's coming. Under Joe Biden, there was always a threat that you'd have looming government oversight in a negative kind of way. Analysts say with Trump in the White House, you're more likely to have an administration much more favorably inclined to the internet currencies. So any rules governing crypto probably going to favor the sector as opposed to being pernicious. But that also could be a problem for buyers snapping up the Bitcoin at these prices. when you've got prices for assets are rising, whether it's stocks or crypto or whatever you got, analysts, the people telling you to buy, tend to be cheerleaders. One study I found said that 70% of stock analysts were overly optimistic in their predictions about equities. You don't get a lot of sells because you don't make as much money then. It doesn't mean they're lying, it just means they're really, really keen. The way I think about it, it's like if you've ever gone to the playground when your kids were little, no parent said, yeah, my kid's a dummy. They all said, oh, my kids are great. It's kind of like that with stocks. Here, though, it means that analysts will keep talking up the virtual currencies as they keep rising. But if the market starts to see their price too high and you buy currency at that level, the value of your crypto money could evaporate just as quickly as it went up.
And finally, a story about something where under the category heads are going to roll, someone's going to lose their job. Why is Mattel pulling dolls based on the film Wicked off of store shelves?
Yeah, Wicked's supposed to hit theaters November 22nd, so Universal and a number of retailers are pushing Wicked-themed products at beauty bars, department stores. Mattel, not surprisingly, produced a line of dolls based on the movie characters. The problem, the company inadvertently printed the web address to a pornographic website on the packaging labels for the dolls. So kids thinking they were going to a site with Wicked tie-ins were sent to a different Wicked website, Wicked Pictures. Mattel apologized for the error and started pulling the dolls from Target and Walmart and the usual places. From time to time, stores do make these mistakes, sometimes not thinking a tagline through. I found this one. Vacuum maker Electrolux once produced this gem. Nothing sucks like an Electrolux. Sometimes it's a measurement problem. In 2014, Subway got in trouble because its foot-long sandwiches were only 11 inches long. And then the UK market, supermarket chain Liddy had to yank a kid snack because its packaging code sent kids to a porn site. But if you actually have the offending Wicked dolls this time, you might not want to throw them away. That's because the mislabeled dolls are going for as much as $2,000 on eBay.
Yeah, I suspect that they are. Probably pulled those very quickly off the shelves, right? What a crazy story.
Yeah.
What's going on in the markets this morning?
Right now, generally negative. Europe, the company earnings driving those markets down. So France down more than 1%, UK and Germany in negative territory. Asia, a little more U.S. gloom because they see looming trade wars with China. So Hong Kong off more than almost 3%. Shanghai down about 1.5%. Oil's up 39 cents, $68.43 a barrel. And the Canadian dollar down about 1/10 of a cent, 71.69 cents U.S.
All right. Thank you, Phil.
Thanks, Marcy.
That is Phil DeMont from our CBC Business Desk. Well, I'm just posting on my Facebook page right now. If you are a regular listener to the show, then you know that during our show hours, between when we're on air at 6 and 8:37, the show, the page acts as a show page, but it is under Marcy Marcusa. The question I'm asking is, what's the best deal you ever scored? Let us know. And if you want to call the listener line, even better, 788-3205. The question is, was it really a deal? So we want to hear these stories, but I'm asking the question because a lot of us have walked into a store and there's a big banner that says everything's 80% off. So you go in and there's a deep discount on a spatula or whatever, but 6 months later you go by the same store and everything's still 80% off. What? Danielle Nerman of CBC's Cost of Living asks, if everything's always on sale in 2024, it seems to be a trend, is it really a sale?
Darian Kovacs is a child of the 80s, so he remembers what it was like to wait for stuff to go on sale.
Black Friday used to be an actual thing. Boxing Day used to be a thing. We used to wake up early on Boxing Day and go down to A&B Sound to get those limited quantity of flat screen TVs that were available.
Darian runs Jelly Marketing in Langley, BC. He says, we're not lining up outside electronics stores anymore. We're shopping in our PJs, popping Cheetos, and letting the sales come to us.
Yeah, and there isn't a website you can't go to where you can get 10% off by signing up to their email. And so because of 24/7 shopping, it's become the need and the desire for consumers to have 24/7 sales.
And retailers are happy to comply. Sales are a powerful way to move product. But just because something is on sale doesn't mean you're getting a great bargain. Steve Santisi is an advertising and competition lawyer in Toronto.
One could argue, I think very reasonably, that a sale could be a cent, a dollar, as long as there has been a discount. Technically, it is cheaper.
The store doesn't have to tell you what the old price was. It can just say, hey, these knives are on sale.
One day and one day only.
Another slick move retailers use?
Beat the clock and get up to $1,500 off.
Creating a sense of urgency.
15% off everything else. These amazing offers end Monday.
But if those offers don't end Monday, a company could land in hot water. Last fall, the Canadian furniture chain Dufresne was fined $3.25 million for offering the same promotion over and over. In other words, its limited time offer wasn't really limited.
I have clients that have received warning letters from the Competition Bureau saying, we're watching you, we're monitoring your so-called sale prices, you better tidy this up.
Steve Sentisi says cracking down on false and misleading sale claims is a top priority for the Competition Bureau. Over the last 2 decades, it's brought challenges against the Bay, Sears, Amazon. But Steve says it can't catch them all.
Generally speaking, the Bureau does not often go after the small players because they have limited resources and budgets, so they tend to pursue these kinds of issues with the larger retailers and in some particular sectors, particularly furniture and appliances.
Darian Kovacs says the only way to know if a sale is truly a sale is to do your homework. If you really want a new set of pots and pans, track the price over time.
Yeah, I can tell you what I do myself. I actually put some items in my bookmark of things I want to get. I watch it for a while, like sometimes almost, 30 to 45 days.
Maybe you'll save money and earn some bragging rights.
I think there is a social part of all of us that wants to go out and tell people, hey, I got this shirt 50% off. It used to be 40, now it's 20. Because that's the way to win at life. You can win at life by getting that sale.
For CBC Radio, I'm Danielle Nerman.
Go ahead, Manitoba. What's the best deal you ever scored? 788-3205.
Oh, what's that? You like my shoes? I got them on sale.
Cute! 8 minutes to 7 o'clock now. 2 degrees clear right now in Winnipeg. Well, let's turn our attention to more serious matters. The Canadian government is facing a slew of possible challenges with the return of Donald Trump to the White House. In response, last week, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau reestablished the Cabinet Committee on Canada-U.S. Relations. We have Ryan Tumulty here to talk about it, political reporter with the Toronto Star. Good morning.
Good morning.
What is it?
It's a high-level cabinet committee. It's about a dozen cabinet members focused on the Canada-U.S. relationship. And I think it's a recognition that over the next 4 years, that Canada-U.S. relationship might be a little rockier than it has previously. This is a committee that existed in the last Trump presidency. It's an opportunity to sort of look at the big issues that are coming Canada's way and maybe try to get out ahead of some of them. But certainly, I think the Liberal government recognizes that the Trump presidency will be a big part of their day-to-day, for at least the next year.
How would you describe the messaging from the Prime Minister and his cabinet ministers since last week in Trump's win?
Yeah, I think they've been trying to project a certain measure of calm. They've been trying to, highlight that, they've been here before, they know how to manage this relationship, that, this is something they, there is a trade relationship in place, there is a trade agreement that Trump signed in place, that there's basically no reason to panic, at least not yet. And, they've tried to measure their tone. So, I think of someone like the Immigration Minister, Mark Miller, normally quite direct, quite blunt in his comments, really willing to sort of jump into the fray. He's been quite muted over the last week. When he gets asked about Trump's plans for mass deportations, he sort of downplays the risk of that and suggests that Canada will deal with all of these measures in time.
Speaking of speaking freely, Krista Freeland has used the term, and Krista Freeland's chairing this committee we're talking about, by the way. She's used the term, quote, wannabe MAGA maple syrup conservatives, end quote, in the House of Commons. Given the results of the U.S. election, how much do you think the Liberal strategy and, I mean, frankly, language is going to have to change and shift? And how do they do that?
Yeah, I mean, you'll know that she used that term before President Trump was reelected. I suspect that may go away now. But certainly the Liberals have always been keen to draw parallels, to draw connections between Trump and the Conservatives here in Canada. Certainly, it's pretty obvious why Trump is deeply unpopular here in Canada. He won in the U.S., but if the election was held here, he would have lost quite handedly. And so, I think for the Liberals now, they are walking a tightrope. They have to be careful not to alienate Donald Trump when they are trying to attack Pierre Poilievre for being like Donald Trump.
And what is Pierre Poilievre saying about it? What are the criticisms that the Liberals are already facing from opposition parties like the Conservatives about how they may deal with the Trump administration? Yeah,
Pierre Poilievre has talked about the way the Liberals run an economy, basically arguing that they are now pushing jobs to the states. Donald Trump has promised fewer regulations, fewer taxes. The Conservatives have been keen to jump on that. They've accused the Prime Minister of auditioning for the role of job creation minister, but, in Trump's cabinet, not in his own. So that's kind of been the line of attack. The NDP, of course, also have attacked the Liberals for not being hard enough on Trump and for basically not denouncing him. And I think what you're seeing there is that opposition parties have a lot more latitude to attack a U.S. administration than the government does.
Before you go this morning, I mean, there is another by-election. This one's in British Columbia. What's at stake for the Liberals in this by-election, especially considering that they were watching very closely some of the upsets that had happened previously in the year?
Yeah, so this is Cloverdale Langley City. I would say, the Liberals hold it now and, of course, would like to keep holding it. I don't think that's likely given where polling is because they just barely won this seat the last time. This was a tough-fought race. Previously, it's been a Conservative riding. So unlike the previous by-elections we've seen this year, Toronto, St. Paul's, and in LaSalle, where the Liberals lost really safe seats for them, I don't think there will be the same note of alarm, I guess, if the Conservatives lose this. If the Liberals lose this one.
All right, Ryan, thank you for the analysis. Always appreciate it.
All right, take care.
You too. That is a Ryan Tumulty, political reporter with the Toronto Star. 3 minutes to 7, Tuesday morning. Heather's here with headlines.
Good morning. A man was rushed to hospital with very serious injuries after what police say was a serious assault in a trailer park. Winnipeg police were called to Auger Avenue around 7 Sunday evening. That's on the west side of Winnipeg near the perimeter. Police say the victim remains in hospital. One suspect is in custody. And a Winnipeg businessman with a long history of legal battles is back in court. A woman alleges Richard Boone swindled her out of the ownership of 2 properties. We'll hear that story in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right, thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's going on in the next hour of our show here. Just before 8 o'clock, a local pharmacist is going to be on talking about how to make it easier for people who have autism or sensory issues to get their flu shots this fall. So stay tuned for that. Also, Canadian author and journalist Tanya Talega is going to join us to talk about her new book and the emotional journey that came along with it, because this one is personal. And as we've been sharing, and as you likely know, the Bombers are headed to their 5th straight Grey Cup after eliminating the Saskatchewan Roughriders over the weekend. We're going to talk to a fan that's determined to be at the game no matter what it takes. In Winnipeg this morning, we're expecting a sunny day and a high of 7 degrees. It's going to be windy. Winds will gust 50 to 70 before they calm down later this afternoon, and they'll gust out of the south. Right now, winds at the airport are gusting south at 62 kilometers per hour, and it's clear and 2 degrees to start our day here. Light snow, by the way, falling up into Dooley Lake and Lynn Lake right now. On the commute this morning, things are pretty good. Everything's okay so far from what we are hearing, that is. So please report something on our commuter line to Corey at CBC. 788-3093 is where you can reach him if conditions change for you, no matter where you are in Manitoba. Stay with us because World Report's coming up next. It's 1 minute to 7 a.m.
Heron was 15 years old in the spring of 1993 when she disappeared, and in over 30 years there has been no trace of her.
I did know before the night was over she was dead, though.
A story of murder and heartbreak and investigative error.
He was 90% sure he was going to be convicted.
From CBC Podcasts, I'm David Ridgen, and this is Someone Knows Something, Season 9, The Christine Heron Case. Available now on the CBC Listen app and everywhere you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. The majority of criminal cases in Ontario are ending with charges dropped or tossed before they can be tested at trial. New data from Statistics Canada shows that is a dramatic shift from a decade ago. Back then, most cases ended in guilty decisions. As Nicole Brockbank reports, courthouse staffing is part of the problem.
The way that it ended, my whole world went up in flames.
Emily Quint was devastated when the sexual assault charge against her alleged assailant was tossed out a year ago. Not because of the merits of the case, but because courthouse staffing shortages delayed the trial.
In that moment, it was like the stages of grief just flew through my body.
New trial dates were outside the time limit set by the Supreme Court's Jordan decision, so the charge was stayed for an unreasonable delay. The case is one of a growing number in Ontario that aren't being decided on their merits at trial. In 2022-23, the majority of criminal cases ended with stayed, withdrawn, or dismissed charges. The Canadian Resource Centre for Victims of Crime hears about the impact of those decisions firsthand. Sarah Crawford is the executive director.
A lot of our victims and survivors are losing faith in the process.
To prevent that from continuing, Donna Kelway, president of the Ontario Crown Attorneys Association, says the courts need more resources. Otherwise, delays could see charges laid by police go nowhere.
It's completely wasted if they're able to do all of that and then we don't have the resources to prosecute them.
In a statement, a spokesperson for Ontario's Attorney General said $29 million is going toward increasing staffing for the justice system this year. Nicole Brockbank, CBC News, Toronto.
Energy giant Shell has just won a major court battle. An appeals court in the Netherlands has overturned a landmark ruling against the company. Shell had been ordered to cut its carbon emissions by 45% by 2030, but today that was overturned. This activist outside the court says environmentalists will keep battling.
It's very disappointing, obviously, but obviously we're not done with Shell. We're still going to campaign, we're still going to fight, and if this isn't the way, there will be another way to make them reduce their emissions, I think.
The court acknowledged Shell is obligated to reduce emissions, but added there is no scientifically accepted agreement on the required amount. World leaders gathering in Azerbaijan for the UN's climate summit are getting a harsh dose of reality. COP29 officially opened today with a reminder of what is at stake. The changes to our environment will be stark if global temperatures rise more than 1.5 degrees Celsius. International climate correspondent Susan Ormiston has the details.
The sound you hear is the ticking clock.
The UN Secretary General is often the most eloquent doomsday speaker in the room.
We are in the final countdown to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And time is not on our side.
Antonio Guterres kicked off the Leaders' Summit at the climate talks, setting out the injustice of climate change.
The rich cause the problem. The poor pay the highest price.
COP29 is focused on finance, demanding well-off countries with high carbon emissions pay the costs for severe climate damages in developing countries and help them to get off oil, gas, and coal.
There's a lot at stake for COP29.
It won't be easy, with costs estimated above $1 trillion, says Catherine Abreu, a climate policy analyst.
It's actually going to be up to a coalition of countries, I think, including developed and developing countries, to make sure that these talks don't wind up in a failure.
Over 100 world leaders are expected to speak to the conference over the next 2 days, still adjusting to the U.S.'s lame duck leadership, given the incoming president, Donald Trump, who threatens to pull out of climate treaties. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Toronto.
In China, at least 35 people have been killed by a car ramming into a crowd. More than 40 others are injured. It happened in the southern city of Zhuhai. Police have detained the 62-year-old driver. He was found unconscious in the car with what are believed to be self-inflicted wounds to his neck. A motive is still being determined, but authorities say he was unhappy with the financial terms of his divorce. A judge in New York is expected to decide whether or not to overturn Donald Trump's criminal conviction. It involves the U.S. president-elect's hush money case. Trump was convicted of 34 federal charges earlier this year. But later, a Supreme Court decision brought the legality of that conviction into question. The CBC's Richard Madden joins me now from Washington. And Richard, walk us through this case.
Yeah, this all goes back to a ruling earlier this spring in New York. A jury found Trump guilty of falsifying business records to cover up $130,000 in hush money payments to adult film star Stormy Daniels to buy her silence before the 2016 election. Trump's sentencing was set for later this month, but now things are complicated. Manhattan Judge Juan Marchand will decide whether to uphold the verdict or dismiss it altogether, because Trump won the election. And there's also that U.S. Supreme Court decision earlier this summer that ruled presidents are immune from criminal prosecution. Now, Trump's lawyers have long argued evidence in that case shouldn't have been presented in the first place. So the judge is expected to decide whether to toss Trump's conviction altogether or order a new trial. Now, Trump won the election, of course, and Trump's lawyers argue you can't sentence a president-elect. Their strategy in this case and the other ones has been to delay the proceedings, and that strategy appears to have worked.
How could today's decision impact Trump's other cases?
Yeah, it looks like they're on the fast track to disappear. Special counsel Jack Smith, who indicted Trump for allegedly trying to overturn the 2020 election and mishandling classified documents, is reportedly talking to Department of Justice officials how to wind those cases down. There's that election interference case in Georgia. That's on hold. So critics anticipating Trump will face punishment for any of these charges is unlikely, at least for the next 4 years.
Thank you, Richard.
You bet.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers says its members could walk off the job as early as Friday if the union and Canada Post cannot reach a deal. It has issued a 72-hour strike notice to the company. The union says the two sides are still far apart on a number of issues, including wages. Canada Post has yet to publicly respond. Rebuilding Jasper, Alberta is getting even more challenging. The national park is entering its busy winter tourist season. In July, a wildfire destroyed 1/3 of the town's buildings. Construction crews are dealing with supply issues and the extra red tape that comes with building on Crown land. The CBC's Acton Clarkin has more.
Jasper contractor Toby Gifford is planning multiple rebuild projects in the mountain tourist town. He has concerns about the scale of replacing 350 plus buildings that burned.
All the materials and all the equipment and the things that are going to be going on is going to be challenging to have everybody kind of trying to build all at once. A lot of our building community shares the same contractors.
At the office across the street from Gifford's, Parks Canada staff recently finalized rebuilding material and zoning rules crews must follow for better fire protection, including banning wood siding and roofs and pushing for materials like cement and metal. Emily Goldney is a Parks Canada planner.
We talked to experts in fire smarting, talked to engineers and lawyers, and we also reviewed best practices in planning across North America.
2,000 kilometers away, there are similar rules in Paradise, California, put in place after a 2018 wildfire burned most of that town. Now, after rebuilding 40% of its housing, the town's recovery director, Colette Curtis, says even with added protections, there are no guarantees against Mother Nature.
Nothing will make a community fireproof, but all of these things layered together can reduce your risk.
It's a truth on the mind of Toby Gifford back in Jasper as he stands over the wreckage of his former workshop made of bricks and steel.
The fire smart materials are only as good as the size of fire that they're going to face.
Acton Clarkin, CBC News, Jasper.
A Canadian Christmas classic is being covered in a way you have never heard before.
Maybe this
And I'm just going to show you where you're... No, the recorded version.
Oh, sorry.
That is retired Philadelphia Eagles player Jason Kelce and Stevie Nicks in the recording studio. They have just recorded their version of Maybe This Christmas by Ron Sexsmith. Here's the original.
Maybe this Christmas will mean something more.
Kelsey and 2 other Eagles players have been releasing a special Christmas album each year since 2022. His cover of this song is on this year's record. All profits from the album benefit local Philadelphia charities.
This will ask us to call someone we love.
That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Reasons we can't quite recall.
Well, you're either saying it's way too early for that, or you're smiling ear to ear like some of us are here at our team at Information Radio, loving the Christmas tunes already. Thanks for joining us. I'm Marcy Marcuso. You are listening to CBC, and in a moment we're going to check in with some of those team members to check on weather and traffic. It's going to be sunny today, I can tell you that much. It is Tuesday, November the 12th. Thanks for joining us on the show. This hour on the program, we are going to be talking about the Bombers headed to their 5th straight Grey Cup. We're going to hear from a fan who is trying desperately to get to the game in BC. In addition, we'll talk to Canadian author and journalist Tanya Talega, who's going to join us to talk about her new book and the emotional journey that came along with it, because much of this new book, The Knowing, is all about her personal journey to search for her great-great-grandmother, Annie Carpenter, so stay tuned for that. Plus, at 10 to 8 this morning, we're going to hear from a local pharmacist. They're trying to make it easier for people who live with autism or sensory issues to get flu shots. So it's all coming up still ahead here on Information Radio. Right now, though, Heather Wells is in with other headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority says it is investigating after a man says the wrong leg was amputated. 48-year-old Jason Kennedy lives with a bone infection and diabetes. He says he knew he may eventually lose both his legs. Kennedy says when he went to Grace Hospital for amputation on October 31st, he understood his right leg would be removed. But when he came out of the procedure, he found it was the left leg below the knee that was gone. We're going to hear more about what happened there. And the city of Winnipeg is struggling to offer services in French to bilingual Winnipeggers. A city report says a lack of resources has delayed improvements to government services in French at all levels. We'll hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, merci, Heather. Let's get into what's happening in the forecast. Abby, it's going to be sunny. I like that. I'm one of those people that doesn't like the cloud cover. I'm fine with the cold, but the cloud cover can get, I don't like it.
I'm fine with the cold as long as some sunshine out there. It just, brings out that bright in me.
Agreed.
So I'm just going to take it. And I'll just add 6 more weekends, by the way, Marcy, and I'm going to move on. I didn't say anything, just 6 more weekends. Across the province, we're looking at mainly sunny conditions in most of the areas with some cloud cover moving in later, as mentioned. You should see that breezy condition from the south. We will see temperatures getting to -12 in the northern part of the province. Right now, Winnipeg, we are at 3 degrees, clear outside, a sunny day ahead, though that wind is already picking up, and it's going to be easing as we get to the afternoon period. We will see temperatures climb to a high of 7. We're seeing light snow already up north, light rain shower in Thompson, and cloudy conditions with that snow coming in for Churchill later today. The northern region should be seeing 5 to 10 centimeters, and down south we're seeing temperatures hover between -1 in Brandon and then 3 in Dauphin. So it's just going to be a sunny day in most of the regions down south. Some clouds will roll in later, though the north will see snow and cooler temperatures expected. Right now, 3 degrees. That wind is already picking up. The gust is picking up from the south, and it's going to be blowing strong like most of the morning. We do warm up, though, to a high of 7 today in the city.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
And now it's time to check what's going on in your commute.
Yeah, we'll start North Main, just before the perimeter. Main and Red River in particular, the lights are flashing red in all directions. There was a multi-vehicle collision there earlier, so that hasn't been fixed yet, those lights at the intersection, so treat that as a 4-way stop. Might be some backups there. As well, reminder, starting today, Portage Avenue East is going to be closed for a full week. That's the section between Main Street and the baseball field. So there's the Fairmont along the way. It kind of takes you past the old Bank of Montreal building. That's going to be closed for Portage Avenue opening construction as they get ready for that. It will open temporarily for the Santa Claus Parade on November 16th. If you see anything else going on out there, though, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
You know what I'm seeing, you guys?
What's that?
Comments coming in from listeners this morning.
Okay. Oh.
So if you're with us in the last hour of the show, we heard this item from the Cost of Living, which is a national show that looks at, well, the cost of living in Canada on CBC. But they were talking about when a deal's not a deal. Like, how could everything possibly always be 80% off?
Totally.
So we asked you for your deals, and there's some good ones coming in.
Okay.
Sherry Pearson said, a free Dyson vacuum. I went to our local recycling depot, and so she found it there, I guess. It didn't work, but I know they have a great repair warranty. So I called, and it was still within the warranty period based on the serial number. They sent me a box. They paid for shipping. They had it sent back. They repaired it, and they sent it back in great working order. And it still works great because that was a couple years ago. It was the best deal ever. Cost nothing.
Do you even call that a deal? That's just like a find.
That is, okay, ready? That is this.
Yeah, that is. Sounds like a good deal.
I feel like that's peak Winnipeg.
That is so smart, though, right?
I had something similar some time back. My TV broke and it wasn't up to like 6 months. Oh, no, I think it was not up to a year old. And I just walked into the store. I said, hey, guys, this is broken. And they said, oh, we don't carry that brand anymore. You know what? Just bring it back. And they gave me a bigger one.
Really?
A bigger one.
So you gotta ask. I think that's the other thing about
plus store credit.
Oh, you got store credit too?
Yeah.
I think sometimes people don't ask, they don't check, they're just too quick to throw things out, right, in this society. But I mean, wow. One more quick one here, and then we'll invite you to call. Judy Herskovich wrote in, not a deal for her, she said, but a long time ago, I had an aunt, she writes, who bought a pair of shoes from Eaton's. Remember Eaton's department store downtown? Still love Eaton's. After 25 years, this woman took the shoes back because they were no longer comfortable for her. 25 years. Eaton's refunded her money and honored their guarantee because it said satisfaction guaranteed or money refunded, quote, on the actual, I guess it was a box or bill or whatever, but that was their slogan. 25 years, can you imagine? Would you do that? Would you even think of doing that?
Keep your receipts, people.
Right.
Yeah, I know. That's the move.
I might just be bringing my receipt 25 years from now.
100%. 788-3205. Best deal they ever got. All right. Well, you are not going to get a deal on Bomber tickets for the Grey Cup. I'm just putting that out there. It's going to be a really exciting week for football fans. For the 5th year in a row, the Winnipeg Blue Bombers are Grey Cup bound. Next Sunday, we're going to watch them take on the Toronto Argonauts in Vancouver's BC Place, and they've got a score to settle after losing one of those Grey Cup finals to Toronto. One superfan's determined to be there no matter what. As you may have heard in the news, Tina Antonation, or she's better known as Bomber Woman, has been to every Grey Cup since 2019. She says she is not sitting this one out. She actually has her game ticket. She has accommodations, but she doesn't yet have a flight booked, and she's on the line. Good morning.
Good morning.
Why no flight book? Can you not get off work?
Well, that was kind of the deciding factor. I couldn't get the whole Grey Cup week off, so I was thinking, a quick little visit, and that would be sufficient enough. Get the game day in, and that was it. But upon looking, it's been a little difficult, I'm not going to lie, but we are still kind of taking a peek at see what's out there, if I have to do a little connection somewhere else. If anybody's got a private jet out there that I know, that would be the good time to tell me.
So you're trying to see if you can make it work for your schedule. Obviously, we can hear that. Why do you go to all the Grey Cups? What's the point of actually being there, and what do you love as a Manitoban?
After not having one for most of my life, it was just, I think I just got an adrenaline rush off of it. And every time it kind of crept closer in previous years, I was definitely more prepared. Let's just say that. But it was just kind of like whether we were there or not, I was determined to be there just because of, everything else that goes on around. It's not just game day, it's the whole experience. It's the people that you meet. It's all the events going on and stuff. So it really became just a tradition in my football season. So
what's this football season been like for you as a Bomber fan? I mean, listeners know I'm a Bomber fan as well. I didn't watch part of the beginning of the season. What was it like for you with that crazy slow start where they had a lot of losses in a row?
I mean, it definitely was different, but as a fan, you almost had to see this coming, that there was going to be significant changes. A lot of key players going off and seeking out different teams, taking care of their families essentially, and you can't fault anybody for that. So we knew that we were going to have some new players in, and it was going to take a little time for us to get a rhythm, get gelled together. So, and that's just pretty much what we proved. It took the newer guys a little bit longer to get in with the vets to just kind of find that rhythm, but it looks like we found it.
For sure. I mean, wow. Some of the last wins have just been convincing. I mean, Saskatchewan. I mean, they led that whole game on Saturday against Saskatchewan. What are the greatest memories that you have of being at past Grey Cups? Like, or maybe people, you mentioned staying in touch with people. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Is it prairie fan to prairie fan, or have you connected with other folks from across the country?
Honestly, it's been just kind of a whirlwind. I've met people just from even traveling to the away games. I've met people across the league, and it's just been such a special experience for me because, we do keep up in the off season. We host events. We did a CFL Fans Fight Cancer event, Canada wide in February, and it was just so amazing to see everybody come together. And maybe, we don't see each other, we see each other once a year, but it was just so special to have that connection past Grey Cup. And, I go with my best friend every year now since 2021. I got her hooked too. So that's just a special thing that we share together as well.
Are you going to change your outfit at all if you do make it in for the game? I know you often dress like a version of Wonder Woman, but it's it's obviously a Bomber Woman. So what are you going to add for Grey Cup flair?
Well, in the last year, I did add a little tiara instead of the traditional Wonder Woman headpiece. So that's kind of been the new addition so far. And for Grey Cups, it's been so cold everywhere we've gone. So I've added a nice big warm cape. But I mean, BC is a domed stadium, so I don't think I would really have to change anything.
Yeah, you'll be fine indoor there, right? It's not a bad place to watch a game. Finally, what do you think the Bombers need to do to make sure we don't get upset again by Toronto like that one Grey Cup we all remember?
No, for sure. And that's the thing is I think that slow start and us not having that perfect record and just not being held up to, the perfect standard, I think that's really played in our favor. And we are coming in kind of like an underdog this year, just coming off of, a couple of losses in the Grey Cup. So I think that really the guys just have to stay focused and just remember how they got there.
Well, good luck you getting to the game. Speaking of getting there, and thanks for your time this morning. Nice to talk to you.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Tina Antonation, a.k.a. Bomber Woman, Blue Bombers superfan. The 111th Grey Cup happens on Sunday at BC Place in Vancouver.
Hello, this is Donna Fontaine. I just have a message for Marcy Marcusa. Please don't jinx the Bombers like you did the last 2 years before you closed out the Friday show saying they were going to win the Grey Cup. Thank you. Bye.
Oh, no. The longtime listeners remembering my not-so-finest moments on air. Our director at the time, Pat Kanuga, looked at me through the glass, because there's a big piece of glass right between where I sit in the studio and the control room, where now we got Corey and Kevin and Abby sitting over there. So Pat Kanuga looked at me that morning and he was like, "You did not just say that on the air." And I did. So how about this? Thanks for the call. We will see how the Bombers do on Sunday. 7:23 a.m. is the time right now. It's 3 degrees. It's mainly clear in Winnipeg. A high today of 7. It's going to be lots of sunshine for us. Mainly sunny for the day. Really windy, though. Winds 50 to 70. Already at the airport, they're gusting south at 66 kilometers per hour. So you're going to notice that. Corey's been mentioning that Portage Avenue East, that little section that gets you to the Forks in front of the hotel there, is going to be closed. And that is because they're getting ready for the Santa Parade on November 16th. So you might want to note that. If this week that could be a problem for you on your morning drive or your day drive. Give us a call, though, if anything this Tuesday morning is in your way, 788-3093. We've got some music before we get to morning sports and talking more about what's going on in the world of sports. This comes from Hamilton rock stars, the Arkells. They've got some big feelings and big shows coming up. They're touring Canada till the end of November, and there's unfortunately no plans to make a second stop in Winnipeg this year. So we'll give you a little taste here on the radio. This is the Arkells with Big Feelings. How's that for an intro, Scott Regehr? Big tune, big feelings.
Good tune, big time in sports, all the way around. Football, hockey, take your pick.
Right?
It's suitable stuff.
Yeah, well, we set you up with the Arkells
Nice.
this morning, so why don't you now, why don't you pick up where we left off here, talking about the Grey Cup Bombers. Argos have now arrived in Vancouver, right?
Yeah, although they didn't arrive quite as spectacularly as the Cup itself, Marcy. The trophy brought into Cole Harbour by military helicopter before it was escorted by an armed forces flotilla across Burrard Inlet into the Vancouver Convention Centre. The Argos and Bombers, meanwhile, yesterday, well, they flew into the airport. Quarterbacking Winnipeg, of course, is going to be Zach Collaros. It is incredible to think that had things gone a little differently in the past 2 championships, we could be talking about him as a 4-time Cup-winning quarterback, 4 in a row. In any case, he's had to think about those last couple of losses to Montreal and Toronto in the big game. And he was asked after getting off the plane, does that fuel you ahead of Sunday's big match?
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, I'd be lying to say it doesn't drive you, and it's something that's not always in the back of your mind. It's your job, it's your livelihood. And when it doesn't end the way that you want it to end, it stings. All you're thinking about is how you can better yourself to be a better teammate, whether that's at practice in the meeting room or on the field. So it definitely drives you. If you need any more, motivation, it's not something you want to feel in the offseason for sure.
The league's own data crunchers, Marcy, certainly think Winnipeg's going to come out on top on Sunday. They give the Bombers a 69% chance of topping Toronto, who will be without their star quarterback Chad Kelly, who broke his leg in the Eastern Final, unfortunately. Nick Arbuckle, the backup, will be try to do his thing against the blue and gold defense. Good luck to Nick Arbuckle. Meanwhile, with no home team skin in the game, Vancouverites, Marcy, they're just going to enjoy Grey Cup week. And to that end, a zip line has been set up over the harbor between the 2 convention centers. And tomorrow, organizers are putting on what's being called the largest ever drone show. It's no longer just about pancake breakfasts.
Right? Zip
That's
line.
right.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm not saying anything about Sunday's game. I don't know if you heard the listener that just called in and said, Marcy, you're the reason we lost the last 2 because I spoke too early about the Bombers. So I got nothing.
You're just gonna, it's crickets from you?
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to
Okay.
watch. Just going to watch.
I can hear your inside voice, though.
No,
It's
you
not nothing what
can't.
you're
Don't
saying
say
there. Yeah, I think I know what you're saying, but never mind.
No. On the topic of drones here, some interesting findings released yesterday, actually, in the Attitude Canada report on soccer's governing body in this country.
Yeah, over the past few months, Marcy, RCI has spoken to around 20 former players, managers, agents, and employees with links to Soccer Canada. And their findings, well, that coaches with both the men's and women's teams were so obsessed with obtaining information about their opponents that they'd pressure their employees to spy on them. According to the report, those activities were pervasive years before coaches were caught using a drone to spy on an opponent at the Paris Olympics. Sources told Radio-Canada that, among other things, shortly after John Herdman became coach of the men's team in 2018, he insisted on spying on the small island nation St. Kitts and Nevis, even though they'd never even qualified for a World Cup before. RCI attempted to reach Herdman through his current employer, Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment, but he did not respond. At a news conference at the end of July, though, Herdman did deny using drones during major sporting events while he was the coach.
I've always gone into Olympic Games, World Cups, big events with integrity in mind and the ability to compete at the highest level, following the rules and processes. So, from my side, I'm highly confident that in my time as a head coach at an Olympic Games or World Cup, we've never been involved in any of those activities.
You can read more on this story on our website this morning, and I'd be remiss not to mention the Jets. They're on the road. First of 9 of 10 games to be held away from home. This is against the Rangers in New York. 14-1 so far, but they've played more than double the number of away games at home at Canada Life Centre. So we'll see what gives on the road. My guess tonight is, well, what do you think's going to happen, Marcy?
No, nothing.
Wise, very wise.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm muffling
6 o'clock puck drop.
Thanks, Scott. Take care.
Yeah.
Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg, a windy Winnipeg. Right now, wind is south, gusting to 66. It's going to be gusting to 70 this morning before dropping back a little bit this afternoon. It's going to be a sunny day. We're warming up to 7. The Winnipeg Regional Health Authority says it is investigating after a man says the wrong leg was amputated. 48-year-old Jason Kennedy lives with a bone infection and diabetes. He says he knew he may eventually lose both his legs. Kennedy says when he went to Grace Hospital for amputation surgery on October 31st, he understood his right leg would be removed. But he came out of the procedure to find his left leg below the knee was gone.
When I woke up from my bed, my recovery area, I was in disbelief that they took the wrong leg, and I knew for a fact they did take the wrong leg, and I was just wondering if this was a bad dream.
Kennedy says his right foot was actually in worse condition than his left. A WRHA spokesperson tells CBC the incident is being reviewed by a patient safety team, and members of Kennedy's care team have met with him to apologize. A new report says the city of Winnipeg is struggling to offer French language services to bilingual Winnipeggers. A 5-year report from French Language Services notes city departments are working to increase services in French, but St. Boniface councillor Matt Allard wonders if people aren't asking for French language services because it's inconvenient.
Over time, people have generally gotten used to it being a bit of a hassle to ask for service in French, and therefore, if for those people who do speak both official languages, opt for the English.
The city's Executive Policy Committee will discuss that report tomorrow. Peguis First Nation and one of its economic development companies are suing a contractor who never built a proposed motel. They're also suing a mechanic accused of failing to deliver pricey Zamboni machine batteries. Those two lawsuits are the latest attempts by Peguis to recuperate funds spent during past administrations. One lawsuit accuses Wausau Indigenous Services of not returning or providing an accounting for $1.4 million it received for the motel project in 2019. The other lawsuit claims RT Knight Industries has not reimbursed the $30,000 Peguis had paid in 2021 for Zamboni batteries it says it never received. No statement of defense has been filed in either case, and none of the allegations have been tested in court. A serious assault in a trailer park has left a man with what police describe as very serious injuries. Police were called to Augier Avenue around 7 Sunday evening. That's on the west side of Winnipeg near the perimeter. Police say the victim remains in hospital. One suspect is in custody. A Winnipeg businessman with a long history of legal battles is back in court. A woman alleges he swindled her out of the ownership of 2 properties. CBC's Santiago Arias has that story.
Richard Boone has been sued many times over the decades by financially desperate property owners. Now a businesswoman claims Boone offered his financial assistance so she wouldn't lose an empty lot and a building on tax sales. But in court documents, the woman says Boone's company bought her debt and registered against her properties. Then he told her not to pay outstanding debts or taxes. Boone's company bought her properties when they went up for a tax sale. The woman is now seeking damages. She wants the building's title transferred back to her. Boone declined to comment on the lawsuit, and none of the allegations have been tested in court. Santiago Arias, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Lockouts in ports in Vancouver and Montreal could affect Manitoba consumers if they drag on. University of Manitoba transportation expert Barry Prentice says goods shipped by container from international destinations will be impacted the most.
Just about everything we buy, certainly at the retail level, things that we're buying from international markets outside the U.S. are generally arriving here in containers. So retail products you buy at Canadian Tire or Costco or wherever.
Prentice says it could be a week or two before the effects are noticed. He says the federal government will feel the pressure to intervene if this labor dispute drags on. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers has just given a 72-hour strike notice to Canada Post. That means the union will be in a legal strike position as of Friday if a deal is not reached. The union says it hasn't decided yet whether job action will take place immediately. You can hear more on those stories coming up on World Report at 8. And there are now more deer in England than at any other time in the last 1,000 years. Hunters say culling them is a necessity because the population has dramatically multiplied, especially since the COVID-19 pandemic. That has had, they say, a devastating impact on woodland and farms in England. Forestry experts and businesses say one solution is getting more people to eat venison to help rebalance the ecosystem while providing a low-fat, sustainable protein. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thank you, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Let's go to Abby Adeyemi now, who's got our regional forecast, and we're going to get some sunshine today, my friend.
Yes, definitely. We're going to get some sunshine, but let's get into the regions. Up north, we're seeing snow and cooler temperatures, while most of the southern regions looking for mainly sunny day in most of the areas. Though some cloud covers will be coming in later, and expect that breezy condition to move in also. We're already feeling it outside in downtown Winnipeg. That gas is already picking up from the south. We're at 3 degrees right now, heading to a high of 7. Brandon is at 1, and Clare heading to a high of 9. We saw light snow earlier. That's just transitioned into rain shower in Thompson at 1 at this time. Thompson is aiming for a high of 5 today. Further north in Churchill, -11 and cloudy. We should see some snow roll in this morning, about 5 to 10 centimeters expected, and the highs would only get around -1. Though with the wind chill factored in, it's going to be feeling closer to the 20s this morning. Dauphin is sitting at 3 degrees and clear. We're going to see sunny conditions, aiming for a high of 7. Similar conditions in Gimli, Steinbach, and Morris, with temperatures hovering near 2 degrees and aiming for highs of 7 degrees in those 3 regions. Across board, down south, we're looking at sunny skies with breezy conditions, while the north will see snow and cold temperatures. Winnipeg, we will definitely be enjoying some sunshine and warming up to a beautiful high of 7.
I think today's the day, you guys. I do this once a year. You ready?
Bring it on.
Fa la 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 la.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Corey's rolling his eyes. Can you hear that over the radio? I don't know. You can see it on YouTube. All right, how's the drive?
Yeah, pretty good so far. You might run into an issue if you are at Main and Red River. That's just on North Main by the perimeter. Lights are flashing. There's a collision there earlier that kind of broke the lights. They're just flashing red, so treat that as a 4-way stop. As well, Portage Avenue East, that's the section between Main Street and the baseball park. It's actually closed for the next week or so, starting today, both ways for construction happening at Portage and Main. Look out for that. It will open temporarily November 16th for the Santa Claus Parade. If you see anything else, though, going on, give me a call. That number, 204-788-3093.
All right, thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Well, up next on CBC's Information Radio, what is it like to drive by a family member's grave and you don't even know it? That is just one of the things that Tanya Talega grapples with in her new book. It's called The Knowing, and it chronicles her journey, learning more about her personal family history, but specifically her great-great-grandmother, Annie Carpenter. Her book is also a retelling of the history of Canada through an Indigenous lens. And I want to read, before we invite Tanya to the airwaves with us here, just a little bit of a passage. She writes, "Is it possible that as we continue to move in the same realm as others, our ancestors play with us while keeping us together, holding us close? Do they watch us from the trees or in the gaze of four-leggeds who catch our eyes from the sides of the road? Is there a master plan that keeps drawing us back into the circle?" And I'm pleased to say, as I alluded to here, that Tanya Talega is with us via Zoom this morning. She's, of course, an award-winning journalist and a member of Fort William First Nation, located on the western shores of Lake Superior in Ontario. Good morning.
Good morning from Thunder Bay.
Oh, you're in Thunder Bay this morning.
Yep.
You know, what was it like for you to write about your roots and to go in search of this story of your great-great-grandmother and be so personal in this way in this work?
You know, it was really hard. It's not an easy thing to do, to delve into your family history, especially if you come from a First Nations family that has been fractured by colonization, you know, by the Indian Act, by Child and Family Services. It's hard, and there aren't a lot of records to go find. And actually, the story of The Knowing, this whole book, was actually started by my uncle, my late uncle, Hank Bowen. And he was on a search for over, oh my goodness, 80 years, really. It's been 80 years. Our family has been searching for Annie. my Uncle Hank's grandma, my great-great-grandma, and Liz, really, Annie's daughter. Um, yeah, it's a lot, but I'm glad that we've gone through it because I really think that every single First Nations family has a story very similar to ours.
Where would Annie come up, given that, as you said, I mean, all those decades that generations and generations of the family, were searching for her? Would it be something that was always behind the conversations at your family tables? Would it come up as the family, as all families do, come together, connect, and reminisce? Like, where would she be present in your life? And how young were you when you first started hearing that?
Totally. Well, I always grew up yeah, everyone in our family. We hear stories of those who didn't make it home. There are so many people, First Nations families and communities has a story like ours, which is they're missing family members, people that didn't make it home, children that didn't make it home from Indian residential schools, people that didn't make it home from Indian hospitals or tuberculosis sanitaria or asylums. And I always remember my aunties and my grandma talking about what happened to Annie. She disappeared in 1930. She was sent away to a hospital and never came back again. And also your aunties, they get together, they whisper, they talk about people that are gone and that are missing. Annie's name was always brought up. Yeah, and it is something that I grew up with. And my mom, who is 80, she was the one that was asking me to finally figure it out, go find Annie. She really wanted to know where her great grandma was.
You alluded to this already, Tanya, about the difficulty of trying to go on that search, and I just want to read something here because it speaks to that. You write the NCTR, which is National Center for Truth and Reconciliation, of course, here in Winnipeg, in the documents, and the NCTR supports the concept. You write that the community where the residential school was located should have access to the records. But you refer to an official here, says, quote, the problem is the schools pulled in children from 30 or 40 or more communities, often undocumented, unquote. So he asks, when one community is coming to NCTR for records, what about the 39 other communities who had children at that school too?
Yeah.
It really just outlines how complicated it can be to go in search of the truth.
Absolutely, absolutely, especially on resources like the NCTR and also on other government resources like Library Archives Canada. There needs to be more funding that goes into these places in order to have sort of an army of researchers that can help our people. That is the one thing I kept on also seeing, because it's so difficult when you're looking for records and everything is spelt wrong, or the records are missing. Canada was not in the business of really actually making sure our people had a good education and were taken care of properly. Canada was in the business of assimilating our people and moving us out of the way. A country that tries to erase you doesn't keep your records very well. And that is also part of the problem that all of us are experiencing, is finding those records. Where are they? It's an endless search. And I was lucky to have a lot of research help in the writing of The Knowing, from Kimberly Murray, the special interlocutor into Unmarked Graves and Missing Children, to Know History, a firm in Ottawa that offered to help me after they'd read Seven Fallen Feathers and All Our Relations, and said, if you ever need any help, let us know. I'm like, well, actually, I do need your help. But it's actually community members, people in our communities, that hold a lot of the research knowledge and knowledge about our families. And they were the ones that helped me the most.
Just those conversations with people and following those conversations along in your search.
Absolutely.
Everyone's different. Every author is different. Some authors would prefer we not share the whole story. So I'm going to let you share how much you want to share about what resulted in your search for Annie.
Yes, we did find her, and as you could tell too from reading the very first chapter, I unveil where she is, and so it's a kind of a spoiler right from the beginning. We do find Annie. She was in Toronto. So how weird is that? After all of this time, I was driving by her grave. My mom was driving by her great grandma's grave right at the side of one of the busiest highways in North America, the Queen Elizabeth Way. I mean, how
I have goosebumps. Yeah, I can't
it's
imagine what
it
it was
was
like for
awful, you
you.
know. Yeah, it was, I would travel that road so many times. I can't even tell you how many times to go to Sherway Gardens or to go to this giant IKEA that is just off the highway as well. And there she was. She is in an unmarked grave along with 32 other First Nations people, actually, whom we found when we found Annie.
Well, there's a photograph of your mother by that, unmarked grave. She's, squatting down with flowers. What was it like for her and for your family when I can't even imagine how you told them?
So emotional, when we were driving to see Annie on that first time, we called my mom's Aunt Bernice, my great Aunt Bernice. So she is Annie's granddaughter. She's in her 90s. She's still with us and she's living in North Bay. And so we called her on the way to say, we did it. We found Annie and we're about to visit her. It's just I just can't even put into words the weight of the emotion and the feeling of knowing after all this time, after all this separation, we were coming back together again. It was extremely emotional, especially, of course, for my mom when we got there. And this is about reclaiming and about saying our ancestors' names aloud. Annie Carpenter, and not forgetting who they are.
I can't really think of a better place to leave our discussion this morning. Tanya, thank you very much for your time. Good luck with your book. I'm going to mention when you're going to be in Winnipeg for your launch, which is at the end of this week. We appreciate you being on CBC with us.
Chimigwech, take care. See you soon.
Chimigwech to you as well. Tanya Talega, the author of The Knowing, as well as award-winning journalist and storyteller. She's Anishinaabe and Polish and a member of the Fort William First Nation in Ontario. She writes about her identity, by the way, in that way in the book. So you can read it. And we have 2 copies to give away because she's been gracious with that for us. So first, let me tell you, Tanya's going to be in Winnipeg November 15th. So that is on Friday to talk about the book. And McNally Robinson, if you want to go, it starts at 7 o'clock. Check out McNally Robinson's website. You can find all of the details for being there in person. They often also stream events, so you can check all of that out. But we have 2 copies of The Knowing to give away this morning. And one of them was one I was using for prepping for the interview, but I promise I didn't mark it all up this time. I often give away my interview copy. But you can call us if you want to win the books. And we will take calls at 780-0893, 780-0893. We also will, I'm going to give the out-of-town number here, 1-800-268-5483. And so one of the books will go to someone in town, and in Winnipeg, that is, and one of the books we will award to a caller who calls on that out-of-town line. So 1-800-268-5483 or 780-0893. So call now if you want to receive a copy of the book.
Breaking this hour, CBC News brings you all the local, national, and international news you need to make sense of your world.
I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement.
Now's your chance to enjoy a free preview of Canada's source for breaking and live news.
The air raid sirens went off.
Find out why more Canadians choose CBC News Network over any other Canadian news channel. The CBC News Network free preview on now.
Rival Canadian brewers brawl on a beach in Australia.
Ouch!
A James Bond exhibit isn't allowed to mention the spy.
James Bond.
And what's the one word singer Robert Goulet will not utter?
I think I should call my manager.
Only in advertising. Stories from the front lines on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
Information Radio, 10 to 8 on Information Radio. There I am. Thanks for joining us this morning on CBC. We're going to have a sunny day, a high of 7 degrees. Well, next on the show, let's move to a story about getting your flu shot, but a specific story about getting your flu shot. Cold and flu season is coming up really quick. Some people are already saying that it's just rearing its head. Many Manitobans are already heading to the pharmacy for those yearly flu and COVID shots if you're choosing to get those. But for people who live with autism or any sensory issues, a trip to the pharmacy can be a very overwhelming experience. So to try and make vaccines more accessible, a Winnipeg pharmacy is hosting a sensory-friendly vaccine clinic, and it's happening next week. Jason Hepner is a pharmacist and owner of the Medicine Shop Pharmacy in South Osborne, and he's in studio to talk about this. Hi there.
Hello.
So what is a sensory-friendly vaccine clinic?
So essentially, the clinic that we're going to run will be geared towards people with sensory issues. So, we typically think of those living with autism or other neurodiversities who may be a bit more sensitive to stimuli in their environment. So we'll be running it after hours. We close the pharmacy at 5:30. We're going to start the clinic at 6 o'clock. That allows us to, have a more controlled environment, have it a bit quieter, no music, lower lighting. We're going to have fewer people in the pharmacy, so less stimuli for people who might not deal well with that. We're also have a couple of nurses in to do vaccinations who have some experience with this population. And St. John's Ambulance is nice enough to send us a couple of volunteer dog teams. So we've got some volunteer dogs and handlers that are going to be there to lend some support. And then we can also gear the vaccination towards our patients. So allow us to speak with their loved ones, and if there's a certain thing that would make it more comfortable for them, and we can accommodate it, we definitely will.
You mentioned music, so I'm presuming you're talking about the overhead music that might be on in a store or something.
Yes.
Yeah, so that'll come down and. Yeah. Where'd you get this idea from? What made you want to host a sensory-friendly clinic?
Well, I've been doing vaccinations for years now, and we do a great job in pharmacies of getting a lot of vaccines done in a short amount of time. That's what the season demands. But I realized that experience doesn't work for everybody. So I was actually at a conference in fall and speaking with a colleague from Alberta who's run a clinic just like this, and that sort of sparked my interest and kind of communicated back and forth a little bit, and realized that we could make it work in our environment. So we're gonna give it a try.
It's so smart. Really, it's one of those things where when you hear it, you go, well, of course, there should be an option for people.
There should be, yeah.
Who are the clients that you think it will help? And I'm just curious how many you expect might be kids, because the sensory issues don't go away as you age. So I'm not suggesting that, but I am curious how many might be younger.
I believe probably a majority, but I was having a look at sort of our booking calendar and looking. Yeah, we have a bit of a range of ages. So yeah, definitely this is not specifically for kids. It's for anybody who would benefit from a more quiet and lower stimuli environment to receive their vaccines.
Do you have any idea, Jason, about like what the demand for this kind of an experience, a clinic, and this sensory clinic might be?
I feel it would be high. Right now, I think we're getting the word out. So we still actually do have we do have some availability left. It's going to be next week, Wednesday on the 20th. But I suspect that this one clinic that we're going to do is not going to come close to addressing the needs in the community. So I would encourage any other pharmacies who are able to sort of make this work with their staffing and workflow to definitely do it. There's some good resources out there. They can contact me. I can sort of share my experiences. But once we've done this, there's immunize.org has a great section on how to approach a vaccine clinic like this. So the resources are out there.
I can ask you about the approach for the staff actually administering the vaccines. You sort of alluded to that there will be caregivers that have some experience. What might that mean in terms of keeping in mind when you're working with somebody who has a sensory sensitivity, besides the environment, about actually administering the shot? How would that be different maybe?
I think for a lot of immunizers, they're used to introducing yourself. Do you have any questions? Here's what I'm going to do. Sit down, jab, on to the next. And I think we have to realize that, some people are going to take a bit more time. Maybe we need to explain things differently through maybe a visual map of what we're going to do. realizing, some people we have one request that this person would like to be lying down when they receive their vaccine. So yeah, we'll bring in a yoga mat and a pillow, and just being flexible to work with, what's going to work best for that person.
So flu shot, COVID shot, or other shot of choice, it says, right?
Yeah, so we will, any that are, so pharmacists are able to give in Manitoba without a prescription, flu shots, COVID shots, tetanus boosters, HPV, and pneumococcal vaccines. Okay. So any of those where we would, the patient would be eligible to receive it. If we're able to do it, we're happy to.
So you mentioned November 20th. I know it's 6 to 9, the sensory-friendly vaccine clinic. You said there's a couple spots left, I think. Where should people go for more information or to register or pre-book in advance? Like, what do they need to know?
So they would just need to reach out by phone. Contact us at 204-504-9333. And yeah, we can take their information, and if there's any special requests of, I said no music, but I think we have one person who wants a specific song or a specific artist on while they're there, and yeah, I mean that's the sort of thing we can be flexible with because it's after hours, and we can, if you want to listen to Taylor Swift, that's fine. We'll put that on for you.
204-504-9333.
Correct.
Thank you very much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for your time.
That's Jason Hepner, pharmacist and owner of Medicine Shop Pharmacy in South Osborne. So their sensory-friendly vaccine clinic is, as we've been mentioning, Wednesday, November 12th, 6 to 9 p.m. You can book the appointment or get information by calling the pharmacy. Once again, that number, 204-504-9333. I'm going to say it slowly again. 204-904 I did it wrong. 204-504-9333. It is 3 minutes to 8 o'clock. There is another number you've been calling because we just gave away these books, a copy of The Knowing from Tanya Talega, who was our guest this half hour. The book winners, and the lines blew up, so thanks everybody for calling to give it a shot. But the book winners we chose are Margaret here in Winnipeg, who called us and was fast on the dial, and Dennis, who won a copy of the book in Brandon. We will, after we get off the air, connect with both of you and get your copies of the books to you, so congrats to you. Remember, Friday night, you can check out Tanya Talega if you go to the McNally Robinson Booksellers in Winnipeg event, where she's going to be there in person talking more about The Knowing. And they often stream their events as well, so check out their website. Heather Wells is here now to tell us what's happening otherwise in news. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, he thought it was a bad dream. But 48-year-old Jason Kennedy says when he woke up after amputation surgery, his wrong leg was gone. It happened last month, and now the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority says it is investigating. Peguis First Nation and one of its economic development companies are suing a contractor who never built a proposed motel. They are also suing a mechanic accused of failing to deliver pricey Zamboni machine batteries. Those stories and more coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
It is 3 degrees in Winnipeg. It's mainly clear. The high is 7, and it's going to be gusty winds today, gusting 30 to 50 out of the south. We have lights flashing Main Street and Red River, so that is an issue this morning. 788-3093 if you do see any other problems out there beyond that issue. Coming up after 8 o'clock on the show, we're going to talk to a Métis guitar player who had a job to play live music to patients, but he happened to be someone who played for the late Murray Sinclair while he was in hospital. Part of a program called Artists in Healthcare Manitoba. We're going to hear more about some of those personal moments as he joins us after 8. Stay with us right now, though, because World Report is next.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
The British film director Sir Steve McQueen made a name for himself making massive films about difficult things like the Irish hunger strike or his film 12 Years a Slave. He'll be here to tell you why for his latest project he wanted to focus on London during the Blitz.
Why can't you tell me? Where's my boy?
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Police across Canada are investigating dozens of extortion attempts against South Asians that have those communities on edge. In a new documentary, we will hear from people in British Columbia who say this issue is not being taken seriously. That's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young.
The RCMP is now collecting data on public complaints of bias and discrimination. It is a change a civilian watchdog group has been urging the Mounties to make. It says the scope of the issue was hidden for years. Bias and discrimination complaints were logged together under other categories. Carissa Donkin, with our Atlantic Investigative Unit, has the latest.
Akwasi Owusu-Bempah studies the intersection of race and crime at the University of Toronto.
Making it a homophobic or a sexist or a racist slur is different than a simple problem with an officer's attitude.
Until April, public complaints about discriminatory RCMP conduct were internally tracked as improper attitude. A few examples from New Brunswick. In 2021, someone complained an officer said, quote, all natives were wiped out of Newfoundland. That complaint was supported. In 2017, a sexual assault complainant said a member laughed when she gave her age and the age of the assailant. That complaint was informally resolved. And then in 2022, a person alleged an officer lacked impartiality during their arrest because of their skin color. That complaint investigation is ongoing. CBC News obtained 8 years' worth of complaints about New Brunswick RCMP employees up to 2022. An analysis found at least 52 allegations categorized as improper attitude, but would fit into the new bias category. That's 8% of improper attitude allegations. Alan Polchis is the chief of Sidunsis, or St. Mary's First Nation in New Brunswick. He says there's value in examining the complaints.
You know, if the officer's been called for 5 calls and they're doing the same thing and it's not working, then they have that data.
The RCMP doesn't plan to recategorize old complaints, but in a statement, the RCMP say the bias category will help drive meaningful change in the organization. Carissa Donkin, CBC News, Fredericton.
The United Nations Secretary General says world leaders must pay up to prevent climate-led humanitarian disasters. Antonio Guterres opened the COP29 climate conference. He has a warning about global warming.
With the hottest day on record and the hottest months on record, this is almost certain to be the hottest year on record. And the masterclass in climate destruction.
Climate financing is a talking point at this year's summit. Guterres says rich polluting nations must help poorer countries pay to transition their economies away from fossil fuels. The negotiations involve huge amounts of money, anywhere from $100 billion to $1.3 trillion each year. A big win today for the energy giant Shell. A court in the Netherlands has overturned a ruling that told Shell to cut its carbon emissions. In 2021, a lower court ordered the company to reduce its carbon emissions by 45% by the end of this decade. Today, an appeals court says Shell does not have to comply. Christel Gomansing has the details.
Presiding Judge Carla Joustra dismisses a lower court ruling which sided with an environmental group. Donald Poles, the head of Friends of the Earth, which brought the original case forward, looked down in dismay after the judge's initial words. The organization wanted Shell to comply with targets defined by the Paris Accord. The appeals court said Shell does have a social standard of care to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to protect people from global warming, but ruled it could not determine a defined amount. Back in 2021, the lower court ruling was met with cheers and hailed by environmentalists as a landmark ruling. Following today's decision, Poles was emotional and vowed to keep fighting, but next steps were unclear.
It's too early to announce new steps. We're going to take the time to read the court judgment.
The appeals judge noted that Shell is on track to meet its greenhouse gas emission reduction targets and aims to be net zero by 2050. The energy giant is welcoming today's decision. Christel Gomansing, CBC News, London.
A group of international aid agencies says Israel has missed a deadline to boost aid in Gaza. Last month, the United States issued a 30-day deadline. It said Israel must boost the amount of aid allowed into Gaza, or the U.S. would withdraw military support. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik has the latest from Ramallah.
A group of 8 major aid organizations penned a letter today saying that Israel has not complied with U.S. demands to surge aid into the Gaza territory, that food aid and medical aid and other supplies have not been going in. And in fact, the situation is worse now than it's been at any point in the past 13 months. That is significant because under U.S. law, if the United States decides that Israel is not complying with that demand to increase aid, then the U.S. is obliged to withhold military supplies into Israel, something that's very critical for all of the fighting that this country is doing. Israel insists that it's been trying to get aid in and that, in fact, the number of trucks has increased over the past number of months. Today, after the criticism from aid organizations, it announced that it is opening one more border crossing to get those trucks in there, though it doesn't look as though that is going to change the situation imminently. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News in Ramallah.
Many parts of Canada are currently experiencing drought conditions. Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada says some areas are in extreme drought. Normally, that would cause problems for farmers, especially during harvest. But as Faith Greco reports, some growers in Eastern Ontario say there is a silver lining to the dry weather.
We had the big wet of summer. And now we have the big dry of fall.
Climatologist David Phillips says the shift has been challenging, but it came at a manageable time.
That was frustrating for farmers. They couldn't hay or it's just too wet. And then all of a sudden, now you come to the fall, it's almost as nature's turned off the faucet.
Much of southern Ontario and Quebec is in moderate drought from a lack of rain, though not as severe as other parts of the country. Brian Stratton is the manager of the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority. He says water levels in the Rideau River are holding steady despite the drought. Stratton is also a part-time farmer. He says the drought came at a good time.
The fields were able to dry out in September, October, and the harvest is for the most part complete.
Rob Parks is also a farmer in Ottawa. He grows soybeans, corn, and sorghum. He says the drier weather made harvesting easier this year.
There was no mud this year at all. We're pretty much all done and everything washed up.
Parks says that in past years, tractors would be covered in mud and icicles. This year, he was able to harvest and wash everything down in 20-degree weather. Despite the weather extremes, Parks says his farm had an excellent year. Faith Greco, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Canadian Union of Postal Workers says its members could walk off the job as early as Friday. If the union and Canada Post cannot reach a deal, it has issued a 72-hour strike notice to the company. The union says the two sides are still far apart on a number of issues, including wages. Canada Post has yet to publicly respond. There is more on this story at cbcnews.ca, including the question, should your mail be delivered daily? Canada Post wants Ottawa to rethink its mandate. The Trudeau government is resisting calls to intervene in lockouts at Canada's two biggest ports. Contract talks with dock workers in Montreal and Vancouver have stalled. On a typical day, the ports move goods worth tens of millions of dollars. As Yvette Brand reports, the work stoppage is concerning for businesses.
We really need this to get resolved. It's an urgent issue for us.
Kurt Nickaday is Vice President and Chief Economist for the BC Council of Forest Industries that moves $11 billion worth of softwood and other products through Vancouver's port each year.
I think the government just needs to use all tools at its disposal to get this done.
The terminal is in its second week of a lockout. Mediated talks broke off Saturday. Canada's Labour Minister is urging both sides to settle, but pressure is mounting as billions are lost. In Montreal, 1,200 port workers were locked out Sunday by the Maritime Employers Association. Montreal Port CEO Julie Gascon.
One day at the Port of Montreal, it's $400 million of merchandise.
Montreal workers are holding out for salaries matching the $293,000 average offered to their Vancouver counterparts, who also want jobs protected from automation. Dennis Darby, Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters President, says port work stoppages are coming at a bad time.
Timing couldn't be worse, and we really need to find a better way to resolve these disputes.
He says right now, with a new U.S. president about to take office, it's crucial Canada is seen as a reliable and cost-effective trading partner. Yvette Brent, CBC News, Vancouver.
And that is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. It's Tuesday. Thanks for joining us. Blue sky, but feels just a touch chilly out there because of those strong winds. Thanks for joining us. You're on CBC. This is Information Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app and on YouTube this morning. Well, imagine that you are a musician and you work in hospital and you play to patients, and you don't realize always who those patients are, because to you they are people in need of healing and the healing that can be provided through music. We're going to talk to an artist who have found themselves playing to Murray Sinclair in the hospital. So stay tuned. We're going to hear how all of that unfolded, and of course we'll hear some music as well. We'll also tee up what is happening on Radio Noon for the call-in today. They're looking at Movember. And a small correction to a story that we had on in the last half hour. So I'll have that for you in a moment. Stay with us. So just before 8 o'clock, we had an interview about a clinic that is happening, a sensory-friendly vaccine clinic, and I think I misspoke about the date. So it is happening next Wednesday, November 20th. So it's on November 20th. It's at the Medicine Shop Pharmacy in South Osborne, and it runs from 6 to 9 o'clock. They do still have some spots left, and the phone number, if you want to call and inquire more about more information, 204-504-9333. Heather Wells is here with a news update.
Good morning. Well, the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority says it's investigating after a man says his wrong leg was amputated. 48-year-old Jason Kennedy lives with a bone infection and diabetes. He says he knew he may eventually lose both his legs. And Kennedy says when he went to Grace Hospital for amputation on October 31st, he understood his right leg would be removed. But when he came out of the procedure, he found his left leg below the knee was gone. The city of Winnipeg is struggling to offer French language services to bilingual Winnipeggers. A city report says a lack of resources has delayed improvements to government services in French at all levels. I'll be back with more Manitoba news coming up at 8:30.
All right, thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's going on in the forecast with some more details. Here's Abby.
Good morning. We're looking at mainly sunny conditions in the southern part of the province. We are already seeing that. Some cloud cover will move in later. That breeze we talk about, it's already picking up in the south. We see temperatures warm up to -12 in Churchill. Right now, Winnipeg, the gas is already picking up from the south. That wind is going to be felt as you get your day going. Right now, it is 2 degrees in Winnipeg. It's clear. Mainly sunny skies are ahead, breezy winds, and then it's going to be easing as you get into the afternoon. We do warm up to a high of 7. In the north, we're seeing light snow turning into rain this morning, and down south, we'll see mainly sunny conditions. Right now, Winnipeg, we are just heading to a high of 7 for today.
All right, thanks, Abby.
Thank you.
Corey Funk, there's been a couple things up on the commute.
Yeah, all morning, Maine, that's North Maine at Red River. It's like just before the perimeter there on North Maine. The lights have been flashing because of an earlier multi-vehicle collision there. So treat that as a four-way stop. You might get some backups there. As well, a reminder to folks, starting today, Portage Avenue East is going to be closed for the next week. That's that section from Main Street that runs to the baseball park. So in front of the kind of old Bank of Montreal, Fairmont there. That section closed both ways for the next week. And you're probably wondering, Corey, isn't that where Santa goes down for the Santa Claus parade? Don't worry. Santa Claus will still be able to go down there just for the Santa Claus parade on Saturday. So that's going to be maybe an issue for some folks today and for a week or so. If you see anything else going on, give me a call on the CBC commuter line. That number, 204-788-3093.
People are still writing to us about their best deals, Corey.
Ooh.
After an early morning item about the cost of living, look at in 2024, is a sale really a sale if everything's marked 80% off year round? So people are writing about real deal deals. Rick Fike says a fully functional laptop, $20 I paid. That's what I'm using to type this comment to you.
What?
Yeah, I know.
$20?
$20.
Wow.
Bruno Clausen said my wife won free groceries for a year. I know. Let's all just think about that.
Not just like walking into a store and just like, I'll take a supermarket sweep. Let's just go for it. Put your arm out and just walk down a.
Be exciting, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the regular things that cost us money. It's like, yes. And also Bruno said that they went into a home store and they saw a bathroom cabinet. They described it. They said, we have one left. We'll give it to you 10%. They went to the till, figured 10% off, and actually it was 90% off.
What?
So it was literally they paid 10% of the cost. And finally, with the kicker, here is Judy Moxley saying, best deal of my life is my husband of 50 plus years. Didn't cost me anything, but he's been the real deal the whole time. Cute, right? 8:15 the time right now. I'm Marcy Marcusa. Well, up next on the program, a Winnipeg musician formed a special connection to an audience member recently, and part of it was through his cover of this song.
And the cats in the cradle and the silver spoon, little boy blue and the man on the moon. When you're coming home, Dad, I don't know when, but we'll get together then. You know we'll have a good time then.
That's, of course, Cats in the Cradle by Harry Chapin. But it is a song that Métis musician Quentin Poitras played a lot this summer. He plays with Artists in Healthcare Manitoba. It's a program that brings live arts to patients in their hospital bed. Over the summer, Poitras was playing music to those staying at St. Boniface Hospital, and he realized that one of his favorite clients was, well, I'm going to let him tell you. He's on Zoom to tell us more. Good morning to you.
Good morning.
So we will, by the way, play more of your with your music in a moment as well. But when it comes to this cover of Cats in the Cradle, who were you playing to?
Well, I picked up the song from Maurice Sinclair.
So you, when you started playing for the late Justice Maurice Sinclair, who, of course, thousands of people were at the memorial over the weekend, including the Prime Minister of this country. I understand when you started playing for him in the hospital, you didn't really realize who he was. Is that right?
Yeah. Indigenous Health gives me like maybe a dozen names every time I go in. And so when I saw the name Maurice Sinclair, at first I had no idea who he was. And this is what it was like for maybe 3 weeks of me knowing him. So that's like 6 visits. And that's when his son was there. And his son, Nigan, told me everything that his father did, or at least a very brief, synopsis of it.
What was your reaction when you found out the significance of Maurice Sinclair and that you'd spent this time with him, which must just be charged with all kinds of emotions, I imagine.
Well, when Nigan had told me, and like what his dad had done, I just kind of said, I'm not going to treat you any differently. But admittedly, our conversations did change because, we were just able to talk about a little bit more things, a little bit more openly. So as soon as I knew he was a senator, we started to talk about things like politics.
You can share what you want to. These are personal conversations, so I won't. I'll ask you questions, and we'll get it if you say, I'm going to keep that one for me and Murray. But when you first met him, before you realized and you were playing the music, what kind of music did he like, and what were some of those moments like?
Yeah, so when I first went in, he was very, very surprised, for me walking in with my poncho and my hat and my guitar. And he's like, what are you doing here? What's going on? He's like, is this just for me? And I said, yeah, absolutely, man. And, I always kind of ask, what kind of music do you enjoy? And he really loved blues guitar and country music. So it was really easy. I could go in and I play him some stuff. I played him like 16 Tons.
Oh yeah.
And Country Roads. And then we would just chat about music. Just mostly blues and country guitar, what we liked and what we grew up listening to.
And when you connected with him later, and you realized that, I know there you are as a Métis musician and an artist, and you're with this man who gave so much to our understanding of relationships in this country. What's a highlight you could share about some of your political discussion with him?
Yeah, well, I asked him about, I said, we have our election coming up. How do you decide? How do you pick your man? How do you vote? Like, how do you look through all the shit or something? I had asked him. And he said, don't just look at the party's policies. He said, that's the party show. He said, look at the individual, because the individual that you're picking for, you got to look at his history or her history and look at what they've done in their life, and then decide if that's something that you want to, if that's the person that you want to put your vote in for. So I'll always remember that one. Vote over character, not over policy.
Thanks for sharing that with us. I think a lot of us feel like somehow we're like now you've allowed us to be a fly in the wall of a special moment, and hearing Justice Sinclair's words and advice one more time. How often were you there, Quentin? Like, were you there daily playing? You mentioned that you were there for weeks. So I'm just curious how often you were spending time with him.
Yeah, I saw him twice a week.
Mm-hmm.
And it seemed as though every visit got a little bit longer.
Artists in Healthcare Manitoba, what sounds like a very special program. You alluded to the fact that you get hired by Indigenous Health, you said, and you get paired with patients. How long have you been working in this program?
I guess it's almost been a year now.
What's most rewarding to you in all of the different visits that you have with patients at such critical points in their life?
Oh yeah, I mean it's really, really heavy. It's really, really wild. Like, I never expected music to take me on this journey where I'm making such close connections with people in very, very, fragile times in their lives. But I love getting to collect all these stories from folks and all these songs, because every new song that I learn for somebody, every new cover, every new story that I hear is just, it's in use for the next one. I don't learn the cover and then forget it. I get to carry that with me forever. And so it's just another piece of collection.
I know that this exchange with Justice Maurice Sinclair that you had over spending time with him, you alluded to talking music, talking politics, but I understand it got a little bit personal, that you even credit him with shaping some of your views as of the world as a young Métis man. How so?
Well, a friend of mine had got me his book, and so we chatted a little bit about that, and a lot of times he'd say, the story's from my book, or he'd tell me a funny story or something. But he was telling me about how he went to Europe and how many people there were asking him about his culture, about his heritage, and he didn't really know much. And yeah, I can really relate with that. I'm Métis. My grandma spoke Michif, but she never ever talked about it. It's she didn't go to exactly a residential school, but she was taught that she was dirty or something, and that her name was bad, and that her language was bad. And we're only finding out about this stuff now, and my grandma's gone. And it sucks, it really sucks to not know about these kind of things. So hearing that from such a established character in the community, made me want to continue seeking out answers.
Yeah.
And continue learning about my culture.
What an amazing exchange. What was he like in the last few weeks of his life?
He was incredible, actually. Always smiling, always. Every time I come in, he'd be like, "Oh, Quentin," and he'd smile and he'd be like, "What do you have for me today?" And it was very, very simple. I didn't have to I didn't have to go into his room and win him over again. He knew who I was, and he called me by name, and he was happy to see me. And he was always talking with the people around us, like in the room, our neighbor. He was always seeing if it was okay that we're making some more noise, and making jokes with the nurses and things like this. And then even at the very end, towards the ICU, when he couldn't do anything and I was still going in there. Like the last time I saw him, which was just a few days before he passed, I was thinking, like, should I go in there? Should I go into the ICU? I was talking to a nurse. I was being like, do you think it's a good time? Like, it's kind of weird. It's kind of always what I'm thinking about my job. But I was like, you know what? I'm going to do it because his family said that he likes the company. I know he likes the music. I'm just going to do it. And so he woke up, half a song in, and he's like, oh, Quentin, with a smile. And he's like, how long have you been here? I'm like, I've just been here for half a song, man. Like, I'm going to stick around and play you some softies for you to fall asleep to. And, he fell asleep to it with his feet moving, and he was happy. He was happy to see me there. And I could hardly understand how he could keep that smile on. Him and his family were very, very strong.
Quentin, thank you so much for taking us inside something that I suspect you're going to remember your whole life. And thank you for sharing the photo of people who were on YouTube with us watching the interview. They saw you on Zoom, but they also saw a photo of you and Justice Marie Sinclair in hospital. So thanks for sharing. Really appreciate it. You take care.
Welcome. Bye-bye.
I'm just going to let all those stories sit with me. I don't know about you. While we listen to Quentin Poitras, musician with Artists in Healthcare, he was with us this morning live. And what we're listening to is a live recording of Quentin with an original song that he also wrote that Marie Sinclair also enjoyed hearing on his bedside. This one's Stubborn Stone.
The current always takes me further on. I am not the water, just the stone. Getting smaller as I go along. You're weathering me down until I'm something small, so the wave can finally take me with the flow. Oh yeah, the current takes me slowly as I grow into the thing I hope to mold. I will have to be a smaller stone. I will have to learn to not hold on. The current always takes me further on. I will have to learn to not hold on. I will have to be a smaller stone for the current to take me on. 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 For the current to take me on.
Allison Russell on the recorder. Arkells on the accordion? Shawnee Kish on the kazoo? The Canadian Music Class Challenge is back. Pick a song from our list, create a cover version, upload the video. Amazing prizes are up for grabs, including thousands of dollars worth of new musical instruments for your class. The deadline is November 18th. Check out all the details and register now at cbcmusic.ca/musicclass.
We do have one small issue that we don't believe is cleared up yet. So that is Red River Boulevard and Main Street. So the lights are flashing red there. This is just inside the north perimeter. So 788-3093 if you want to update that or tell us about anything else going on in the city this morning. I want to mention our noon call-in today between 12:30 and 1 o'clock. If you tune into Radio Noon, you can participate. You can call in, get information, call, ask a question, add a story. Today on the noon call-in here on CBC Manitoba, you'll be hearing about Movember. That means look out for men in mustaches supporting prostate cancer research. Prostate cancer, the most common cancer among Canadian men. 1 in 8 men is expected to be diagnosed in their lifetime. So on Radio Noon on the call-in, there's a cancer researcher and an oncology professor that's going to join to answer questions. If you have one now to leave, 788-3797. Your news is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:31, it's partly cloudy. It is windy and 3 degrees. That wind is going to gust at times to 70 this morning before easing up just a little bit this afternoon, a sunny high of 7. The Winnipeg Regional Health Authority is investigating after a man says his wrong leg was amputated during recent surgery. Jason Kennedy is a former commercial fisherman originally from Bloodvein First Nation. The 48-year-old has a bone infection and diabetes affecting both his legs. Kennedy says when he went to Grace Hospital for amputation on October 31st, he understood his right leg would be removed. But after surgery, he saw that his other leg had been removed below the knee.
I knew right away it was my left leg that was gone, and I thought, this can't be happening. This is a bad dream. And all I could do was just think, why is this happening to me? And I knew I was under the impression it was going to be my right leg because that's where the worst pain is, right now.
A WRHA spokesperson tells CBC the incident is being reviewed. Kennedy says his surgeon and 2 other workers have apologized. He says he is offering forgiveness, but is speaking out to prevent this from happening to anyone else. The city of Winnipeg is struggling to offer French language services to bilingual Winnipeggers. A city report says a lack of resources has delayed improvements to government services in French at all levels, as well as Francophone communities having little access to services in both official languages. St. Boniface councillor Matt Allard is not surprised.
There's a gap between Winnipeg's legal obligations to provide French language service delivery, in particular in the Riel district, so that's St. Boniface, St. Vital, and St. Norbert.
The 2018-2022 reports on French language services will be discussed at Executive Policy Committee tomorrow. A serious assault in a trailer park has left a man with what police describe as very serious injuries. Police were called to Auger Avenue around 7 Sunday evening. That is on the west side of Winnipeg, near the Perimeter Highway. Police say the victim remains in hospital. One suspect is in custody. Lockouts at ports in Vancouver and Montreal could affect Manitoba consumers if they drag on. University of Manitoba transportation expert Barry Prentice says goods shipped by container from international destinations will be impacted the most.
Just about everything we buy, certainly at the retail level, things that we're buying from international markets outside the U.S. are generally arriving here in containers. So retail products you buy at Canadian Tire or Costco or wherever.
Prentice says it could be a week or two before those effects are noticed. He says the federal government is going to feel pressure to intervene if this labor dispute drags on. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers has just given 72-hour strike notice to Canada Post. That means the union will be in a legal strike position as of Friday if a deal isn't reached. The union says it hasn't yet decided whether job action will take place immediately. The annual United Nations Climate Summit begins with a dire warning from the UN Secretary General. Antonio Guterres spoke to delegates at COP29 in Azerbaijan.
The sound you hear is the ticking clock. We are in the final countdown to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And time is not on our side.
The UN chief says 2024 will likely be the hottest year on record since temperatures have been tracked, and he's pushing for strong commitments from the countries at this year's summit. And they are off. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers jetting off to Vancouver yesterday for Sunday's Grey Cup against Toronto. Fans of the blue and gold are also gearing up. Superfans determined to be in the stands. Tina Antonation is also known as Bomber Woman. She says she got her game tickets as soon as they went on sale.
Buying those tickets at the beginning of the year, we always it started off as a joke, but we always say, you know what, we're gonna book our ticket. Our team will meet us there.
Antonation still has to sort out her flights, though. This is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers' 5th straight appearance in the Grey Cup Championship. You can find more news updated throughout the day. All you have to do is head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks for the morning, Heather Wells.
Thank you.
Heather Wells in our news department, as well as Megan Ketchison and Joni Nicolo. Thank you, guys. Thanks to our hardworking team of associate producers who research, write the shows, and bring all the lovely conversations to air. It's a team game here, folks. Our leaders in unit, our producers, Leif Larson and Nellie Gonzalez, as well as our live team, Corey Funk, Abby Adiyemi, and Kevin Ipatebo behind the controls of YouTube, waving goodbye. But not before we have one last look at what's going on. So the commute, Corey?
Yeah, Red River Boulevard in Maine. Lights are flashing red from a former collision, so might be backups there as well. Portage Avenue East, starting from Main Street to the baseball park there, could be closed for the next week, both ways for construction.
Abby?
Expect sunny skies in the southern part of the province with clouds rolling in later and a chance of showers, while the northern regions will be seeing snow. We should see about 5 to 10 centimeters in Churchill. Cold temperatures expected with wind chill. Right now, Winnipeg, we are ending the show at 3 degrees, aiming for a high of 7.
Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
That is it for the radio show. I just want to remind y'all that yesterday we launched a brand new podcast. So if you want to check that out, if you've got the earbuds in and you think, oh, awesome, sometimes I leave, I miss the show, but I can check out the podcast and catch up, you can do that. It's called This is Manitoba. You subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and you can check out our YouTube channel as well. So take care and be well, everybody. We will talk to you again tomorrow with another edition of Information Radio and The Current coming up next right here on CBC.